You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. California port truck drivers employed by Pace Cartage have won a court judgment of over $2 million plus interest and attorney fees in a Portland Long Beach wage theft case. The court ruled that they were employees, not independent contractors. Attorney Alvin M. Gomez.
The court awarded almost $2.1 million, plus there's going to be interest on that amount for the past 2 years, plus attorney fees and costs, which should exceed over $1.5 million on top of the $2.1 million.
Gomez says the independent contractor issue played a major role in this case. That's when companies miss workers as contractors when they are in reality employees.
Companies employ schemes in order to avoid the payment of employment tax, workers' comp, insurance, all those things that an employee should have, and they come with a scheme in order to profit from the hard work of those who actually do the work, and the companies profit by stealing the wages of these employees.
Gomez says that Pace is appealing the California Superior Court ruling. The Rebuild America Act, a 5-year plan to rebuild America's infrastructure, would spend $1 trillion in a bid to create roughly 13 million jobs. That's what U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders intends with his bill introduced this week. The AFL-CIO backs the bill, as does the American Society of Civil Engineers. Senator Barbara Mikulski co-sponsored the Rebuild America Act. The bill would make specific targeted investments over a 5-year period to rebuild roads, bridges, passenger and freight rail, transit, broadband, the electrical grid, and national parks. The AFL-CIO says this is a blueprint of what to do about our crumbling infrastructure and would create millions of jobs. U.S. Representative Mark Pocan is strongly against fast-track authority for the proposed Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. Pocan says this deal is a bad deal for workers in many ways, and Congress should not give up its constitutional responsibility and authority on the TPP.
If we're going to protect the environment, if we're going to protect American workers, if we're going to protect our food safety and our medications that come into this country, we're going to protect our sovereignty to have local laws like Buy American and Buy Local. We need to know what's in this trade deal, and giving up our responsibility as members of Congress to actually debate and to amend this is a bad deal.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. Bank of Labor offers a business Visa card with no annual fee and points earned with every purchase, as well as rental vehicle and travel accident insurance. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
And brought to you in part by unionjobs.com, listing open positions with unions, socially allied groups, and community organizations. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they're still right on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. So I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my time.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to. Lots of no rights at work going on around the country. Wisconsin, New Mexico, talk of it in a lot of crazy state houses across the country. And again, I come back to, it doesn't create any jobs. It just makes the existing ones worse. So why would you tout it as a jobs bill? Well, that is what the Republicans do, right? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about our trade policies, a little bit of tax repatriation. Oh, boy, that back again. Tons of stuff. Also going to talk about Social Security. Tomorrow is the day. It's Ida May Day. The woman who got the very first Social Security check for, I think it was like $22, $22.50, something along those lines. We'll talk about that. Lots of stuff to get to. Privatization schemes. Tons as we finish up the weekend. Thank goodness it is Friday. And, the big game, since I'm not allowed to say Super Bowl, because, I have a big soup bowl at home that I call my Super Bowl. Since it's trademarked, you're not allowed to say the words or you'll get in really, really big trouble. And I guess that really goes to show what the No Fun League really is all about. But I'll be watching the game. My wife will be watching for the commercials, and I will be rooting for a blackout since I'm not thrilled with either team. So good stuff on the horizon on the weekend. We are now wrapping up, thank goodness, the National School Choice Week. Gotta love that. And I went to their website today. Wow. What a beautiful website. Amazing. I mean, it's when you have unlimited cash, yeah, you can do these things. And when you've got unlimited cash, you can have, all kinds of videos and stories of, poor children being, so left behind. It's heartbreaking and heart-wrenching. And man, what great propaganda. You got to give them credit. They have taken this school choice thing, really, to the extreme. And look, at the end of the day, I think most people like the idea of choice, true choice. Understand that. What's going on with the school system? It's not about choice. And if you look at what's going on down in the New York City school district, they want to give the whole damn thing to charters. So what choice do kids have? None. It has nothing to do with reform. It has nothing to do with choice. It has none of that. It's all about profit. That's it. Forget everything else. There's nothing more to this. This idea that, we care? No, these big corporations don't. Now, do I think there are some charter school people who get into it with the good heart and all that? Yeah, but that quickly changes to the cash. And we've seen that played out time and time again. And what's got me thinking of this is someone tweeted me the other day, well, what if charter schools did better? Would you care then about the profit? And the answer is, yeah, I would still care about the profit because those are tax dollars. That's our money that's being taken out of the classroom. So if they were doing better, if you'd put that money back in the classroom, maybe it would do even better. But what gets me is, and I was thinking today about that movie Waiting for Superman. How many people saw it? How many people wasted their time watching that piece of propaganda? I couldn't help, as we're thinking about these charter schools, I couldn't help but remember the scene where they had the big lottery and they've got the bingo ball thing going and everyone's got their little piece of paper. Oh, please pick me, please pick me. And then, all the people, yeah, I got mine. And you turn around and you see all of the people who didn't get it. And they were all, just heartbroken and tears because they were left behind. They didn't get into the really good charter schools because they were told this is your savior. And at that moment, I started going, this is a bunch of nonsense. Because a handful of kids got into the charter school. They got choice. No, they didn't. They won a lottery. And then everyone else got, we're led to believe, got more of those crummy falling down schools that are defunded because we took all the money and gave it to the charter schools for the lottery winners. Stop and think about all this stuff because it's just driving me insane. But we had to see the teary-faced children who now feel that their life is over. They didn't win. Because it was supposed to really jerk at our hearts because these charter schools are the answer, right? Well, the data shows no. The data says wrong. In fact, according to Data First, on math, kids in charter schools performing better than everyone else. About 17% of kids in charter schools did better than the public school peers. And you go, hey, 17%, yay. On the flip side, 37% do worse. Now, these are the cream of the cream. These are the parents who cared enough to go through an application process, interview process, a ball process, all of this stuff. These are the kids who have the push from home. And yet only 17% did better and 37% did worse? Really? And everybody, about 46% did about the same. It was about a wash. You take a look at another national study by the Center for Research on Educational Outcomes. They claim that less than 1/100th of 1% of the variation in test performance in reading is explainable by charter school enrollment. And yet, you see all of these, they're doing so much, but no, they're not. Because they're not even tested the same. And this is what's got me really very frustrated. Because we've set up this myth. We've set up this, if it's about choice. No, there's no choice here. Especially from kids who come from broken homes or dysfunctional homes or homes where the parents, I got to be honest, I consider myself somewhat intelligent, middle of the road kind of, I'm not an idiot, but, Mensa, definitely not. I go through, some of the kids to get my kids signed up for sports or to get them to do computer stuff. I struggle with it. It's a process. Imagine if you don't have a computer at home. Imagine if you don't have computer skills. I've never seen one. It's foreign. Everything now is about this process. And the process is put in place. Why? To divide people. So if you're not fortunate enough, if you're a kid and you're not fortunate enough that mom and dad or mom can figure this out, then you're left behind. So you're led to believe. So the choice, not there. And, at the end of it, for me, it comes down to some very simple things. There's no choice. Believe that. There's not. And honestly, I, at the very beginning, was in favor of charter schools, and I'm in favor of the original intent of charter schools, which was to take public schools and give teachers the opportunity to do things differently, to give a school district the ability to do something different. I've said before, I'm a huge fan of the Montessori method, very hands-on, very self-directed. You go to what interests you. Big fan of that. I think I would have done very well in that. There are some people like my wife who can sit and listen to a lecture and remember everything and absorb it and be engaged with it. I wasn't. So there's different ways of educating children. This is not about that. This is about destroying the public system and, quote unquote, reforming it into a private system. That's all this is about. It doesn't get any simpler than that. And when you look at the numbers, the school districts that have lower poverty rates, in fact, according to Ken Bernstein, who points out that U.S. schools with less than 25% of their kids in poverty perform as well as any in the nation. And those that have less than 10% of kids in their district in poverty, they outperform Finland. So at the end of the day, it's about people being broke. This is about poverty. This is about not investing in schools that are at the lower end of the economic scale. And we know that. But yet what we're sold is they just need to do it differently. They need new doors and for-profit models. And the bottom line is at the end of the day, no matter what you say, it's about income. It's about how much money the parents make. It's about the social status of the parents, and it's about the expectations at home. We've seen this played out in study after study. The richer kids with more resources and more opportunities and more power to demand more, their kids do better. Give you an example. My daughter's struggling in math. First thing I did, I went to the teacher. She needs extra tutoring. Every Wednesday morning, my daughter goes in an hour early and the teacher sits with her and gives her individual attention. That doesn't happen in poorer school districts when you've got 30 kids, 40 kids, 50 kids in a classroom, all in the same boat. That's a problem. Or worse yet, if you've got a parent in there that doesn't know they can do that. So at the end of the day, it's about the poverty. It's not about changing the name. It's not about changing ownership. It's about investing in the schools. It's about taking ownership of the schools and making them part of the community. I'm sorry, for-profit, private charter schools, they're not part of the community. I don't know how in the York City School District, Charters USA is going to be part of the community from Florida. I just don't get it. I don't get it. So there's lots of this to talk about. When we come back, a little privatization schemes coming up. If you've been listening this week, I've been talking a lot about Republican Speaker of the House Mike Turzai and his veiled kind of threats to the city council in Philadelphia. You sell your public gas works, or you might not get money for education. Strong arm tactic at its best. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Think before you die. Whoa, think before you die.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. What follows is for those who want to change the world from what it is to what they believe it should be. Those words were penned in the opening paragraph of the book Rules for Radicals, whose author, Saul Alinsky, was born on this day in labor history. The year was 1909. Saul Alinsky became one of the most famous community organizers in Chicago and even U.S. history. Alinsky was born to Russian Jewish immigrants. He earned his degree in archaeology from the University of Chicago, but could not find work due to the Great Depression. His first turn at organizing was that of a part-time labor organizer for the Congress of Industrial Organizations. Soon, he left labor organizing for a more broad-based community organizing. He worked in the back of the yards, forming the Back of the Yards Council, which became a prototype for scores of community organizations. In 1940, Alinsky formed the Industrial Areas Foundation, which served as a leader in community organizing training. He traveled the country helping to form similar community organizations. He then worked with African American organizations, most notably helping to found Chicago's Woodland Organization. The Woodland Organization took on issues such as segregated housing and community health. The Woodland Organization remains active to this day. Alinsky's Rules for Radicals became a guidebook for organizing strategies for countless campaigns. A Time magazine article claimed that American democracy is being altered by Alinsky's ideas, and National Review magazine founder William F. Buckley said Alinsky was, quote, very close to being an organizational genius. At the core of his book are 12 straightforward maxims. For example, a good tactic is one your people enjoy. Another is keep the pressure on, never let up. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Whitehouse. Conservatives pointed to an intense blizzard that hit the Northeast this week as evidence to disprove climate change. Eric Bolling, co-host of Fox News' The Five, argued that less snow disproves global warming.
After all the catastrophic warnings, all the doomsday forecasts, the blizzard of 2015 hardly blew through the Big Apple after all. Many parts of the Northeast have been hit very hard, but the fact is meteorologists blew it. And so did the climate alarmists who are already blaming global warming for the storm even hit.
Radio host Rush Limbaugh claimed that more snow disproves global warming.
They're blaming global warming on massive winter storms. We got more snow, we got more winter storms happening in this country. The years are not getting warmer, and yet they continue to hit everybody with global warming.
In reality, climate science is firmly established. And according to Kevin Trenberth, a climate scientist, warmer ocean temperatures as a result of global warming played a key role in contributing to the severity of the blizzard. For more on this and other exciting stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
$25 bill now, $30, 30 will give me 30, make it 30 bid upon my $30 bill, give me 30, who'll admit a $30 bill? $30 bill now, 35.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. There's part of me that thinks that maybe Mike Turzai's got a fantasy of being an auctioneer. With his fetish of getting rid of selling off the wine and spirit shops. And this week we saw the strong arm tactic of telling the Philadelphia City Council, well, if you don't sell that Philadelphia Gas Works, you're public, you don't sell that, you might not get any money for education. I mean, it's not bad enough for the last 4 years you've held kids hostage in that district. Now continuing to play that game. And I got to tell you, this whole privatization, all of this stuff, it's bad for us. I've yet to find one of these privatization schemes that have actually benefited us the way we were told. I mean, the Harrisburg parking situation is just nuts. But here to talk a little bit about what's going on in Philly and across the country, I've asked Donald Cohen to come on the program. He's executive director of In the Public Interest. InThePublicInterest.org is their website. Donald, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to come back on your show, Rick.
So I see this, what appears to me to be a strong arm tactic of trying to intimidate the city council into selling off one of the city's assets for just a couple of $1 million to close the funding hole that he was part of creating. It just seems to me to be just something seriously wrong with it.
Well, no question. I mean, he could. I don't know the officially you're talking about because I don't live in Pennsylvania, but it's pretty clear he wants it to happen, and that's probably. And there's any number of reasons he could want that. He's a conservative. He just thinks government. He wants to make government smaller. He wants to sell off our assets. He wants to privatize our services, and so he's using his both power of the pulpit, I guess, but also actually power of the purse to punish Philadelphia. So, and so I think one thing I want to say right at the outset as we talk about this stuff is, forgetting about him for a second, the private utility wants to take over the utility system, and therefore they believe they can make a rate of return. They can make money doing that.
Right.
And if that's the case, why aren't we keeping it so that we can use that money to meet our fiscal needs?
Well, because, Donald, and I'll explain it to you. It's very simple. Public bad, private good.
Yeah, well, I get that, but people want also low taxes and low fees, and so if you, the lowest possible tax and lowest possible fees to get the services we want high-quality utilities, high-quality water and schools and all that. So why would we be handing off some of our some of the money we give to the utility to Wall Street or to a large corporation for their profit, for their marketing, for their CEO salaries, for whatever they want? Why would we be doing that? And why would we not be putting it right back into the service to rebuild our system, to upgrade it for the 21st century? It just doesn't make, forgetting about the politics of it, it doesn't make fiscal sense.
Oh, it doesn't make fiscal sense, but the reality here, Donald, is what we've seen not just in Pennsylvania but across the country is all of this tax cut mentality, all of these cuts and create big deficits and big debt. Is now you're in a position where you have to sell it off just to pay off the past debt, and that's part of what's going on in Philadelphia. They're talking about selling it off because they've got a pension problem. Because for a decade the state didn't bother putting money into the pension fund, and neither did the cities because they kept getting away with it. So this is this is the consequence of 30 years of Reaganomics of cutting taxes and doing all of those things that have come home to roost.
Well, that's right. But, conservatives, they seem to think things are free. They believe in the free lunch. Utilities cost money, services cost money, roads cost money, everything costs money, right? Your schools, your houses, your home, your family, everything. And so if you want good services, you have to pay for them. And I guarantee you, that if the private utility takes this over, now they've locked in rates apparently for a few years, but they have to make money.
Yep.
They have to generate a system, generate electricity and power to the region, and generate a profit. So the rates have to go up if the money coming in is not adequate. There's no question about it. So,
Yeah.
things aren't free.
Yeah, and I don't know why we haven't figured that out by now. But again, I keep when I talk to some of my, and I hate calling them conservatives because these aren't really conservatives. These are more the people who have hijacked the Republican Party. I think are more radicals. This isn't the Eisenhower type conservative. These are corporatists more than anything. It's about how much money they can put into their pockets, and they seem to believe that everything should cost. The second you pull out of your driveway, if you're using the road, you should be paying by the foot. If you're going over a bridge, you should pay for that. If you're whatever you do should come with a cost, and you're constantly reaching in your pocket.
That's right. I mean, they sort of twisted it, right? Yeah, absolutely, everything costs. But why would you want to put that in it's crazy to put every one of those costs on the individual. It gives us no power to be able to make the community work, right? Some people can afford it. Some people can't afford it. But it's critical that everybody be able to get to work and power their houses. It's good for the economy. It's good for people. If you make everyone pay for their service, then, it's a regressive way to do things.
Certainly,
right?
but you and I understand that, Donald. You and I get that. It's not good for community. It's not good for society. But those are generally words in the radicals' mind that don't exist. If their mantra is hooray for me and the hell with everybody else. That's been the call from the 80s forward. The one who dies with the most toys wins.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting to me that the people who, out that ideology and those ideas and values and all that it turns out that those people always seem to they also happen to be wealthy and privileged. It's just so, just sort of coincidentally that they're doing okay.
Yeah. And they've got an extra $889 million laying around to spend on the next presidential race, right?
Right. Yeah, there you go. There you go. It's exactly. And all that money comes from, us buying things. All of it. That's Coke, that's private money. You go to Georgia Pacific, what you were just talking about. But in the case of a public utility, every dollar going into a public-owned utility is a public dollar, and we should use it to meet the public's needs.
Yep.
And so if every individual has to pay for their own retrofitting and their own energy and all that, it's going to be pretty hard for us to make it, to address climate in a serious way. You got to be able to address things at a policy level and a community level.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, it still comes back down to the individual in the radical's mind. And even having the conversation about doing things as a community, doing things as a collective, that's socialism. And that we just can't do that.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I for the advocates in Philadelphia and across the state and Pennsylvania and around the country, really, it's just asking a simple question. If they can make money, if they think they can make money and they're going to take, a profit off of that, why can't we? And put every dollar that comes into the system back into meeting the public's needs. Tell me why. Well,
I would argue that their answer would be very simple. Their answer is that they've been indoctrinated with this belief that anything public is slow, is archaic, is bureaucracy, is all that, and just bad, and that private is good. And that's really the simplistic message that I think most of my conservative or corporatist friends believe, that the private sector can always do things better. And then maybe that's true for putting money into billionaires' pockets. I don't know that it's so true to do education, to do healthcare, to do roads and bridges. I just don't know.
Yeah, well, businesses can do some things well, and they can, there's good businesses and bad businesses.
They make profit well,
right? But they're all oriented towards generating return.
Right.
That's their clear goal, and some are good and some are bad. How they run their organizations, and they're public agencies that are run well, that are run not so well. What we need to do is every public agency that spends public dollars and provides public services that needs to be the best there is. We need to take tax dollars and treat them sacred, in a way that, it's your money. We're going to use it in the most efficient and effective way possible to provide services. That's our goal. And we're going to create organization and systems to make that happen. That's not necessarily the goal of organizations that are, that are focused on returns.
Right. And I bring us back to Philadelphia, where the Speaker of the House is threatening to maybe hold some education money back. The big problem in Philadelphia is these charter schools. That last year had $107 million surplus, while the public schools had like a $70 million deficit. And you go, well, wait a second. If you just took the $107 million from the charter schools, gave it back to the public schools where it originally began, you wouldn't have the problem. Maybe you could invest a little bit more. But all across this country, we're seeing the destruction and the theft of public education from kids to be pushed into this charter profit model.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one of the things we're looking at is there's a number of charter schools around the country that are paying rent to companies that are owned by people who are operating the charter, and inflated lease payments and all that. So what's essentially happening there is tax dollars that pays for every kid to go to those charter schools is being siphoned from the charter operator to a landholder. Sometimes that's a hedge fund or a real estate investment trust fund or just a private, just a limited partnership. But we're not just, giving them money to operate the schools. We're actually buying them land.
Exactly.
Those are public institutions. They should be all that money should be ours. All that land should be ours, not theirs.
Absolutely. And I've always said that the charter thing's a big land grab. But you look at just yesterday, I talked about a judge in Missouri had fined the Imagine schools $1 million because they had a private lease with Schoolhouse Finance, which yourself, they're the same company. They're paying themselves for a really pricey lease and then charging the taxpayers for it.
Yeah, and that's happening all across the country. Lots of different types of schemes, but they're all essentially siphoning money and real estate and wealth.
And you know what it's not about? It's not about educating the kids because, as I just said, they're not doing better. And in a lot of cases, they're actually doing worse.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Listen, and just that's exactly right. And, in terms of, taking money into for-profit charters as well as some of these for-profit land deals, again, it's the same situation I was talking about earlier. Every dollar going somewhere else is a dollar not going into the classroom.
Exactly.
Where they need to be.
So the question I have for you, Donald, is at some point, do we wake up to this? Because, I've been screaming for years that I've yet to find one of these privatization schemes that has benefited me in the way I was told. Be it electric deregulation here in Pennsylvania, be it the parking meters in Harrisburg or Pittsburgh, be it our water, our sewer, whatever. I've yet to find one of these schemes that's actually benefited lower costs, better service, all of those things that we're promised. I've yet to find that. I've found a lot of them that have benefited the very wealthy. In fact, all of them just about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we haven't found that many either.
So what do we do? I mean, outside of
we fight back. We fight back, and we actually have some hope. We have a policy agenda that we are introducing in cities and some states across the country that will make contracting, all government contracting, transparent and accountable with decent, good jobs. That makes sure that the government has the capacity to manage contracts. There's a lot of contracts out, the government contract for lots of things, not just privatization. But with the package of the agenda, the legislative agenda we've got, if you really have those kinds of protections, you don't outsource, you don't privatize because it doesn't make sense. It actually costs more to outsource something than keep it in-house, and you lose control.
Exactly.
And people really don't want that. And so we've had a lot of very positive response. People get that.
Because I think the more you have these discussions, the more we focus on the failures and the numerous failures, that eventually we're going to be able to push back on that frame that public bad, private good. At some point, you got to fight back on that.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of, distrust of government is absolutely high. Atmospherically so. But trust of corporations is not high. Trust of corporations is not high. Also, at this period of time, after what happened with Wall Street, and there's lots of examples. So we have something to work with here.
So the point is we need to stay involved, stay active, and keep pointing this stuff out, like what's going on in Philadelphia with the Philadelphia Gas Works. And, of course, going to websites like yours, inthepublicinterest.org. Donald, it's always great having you on the program, and I love the work you guys do, and I hope you'll come back real soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. All right, Donald Cohen, Executive Director of In the Public Interest. Like I said, inthepublicinterest.org, the website. You can get there from our site at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Donald's name. Take you right there. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
gun. I got a picture in my pocket of the lucky one. I'll announce the winner on the radio. With my microphone, I do a super show. I wear a cowboy hat, it is my business hat. I'm on till 1 a.m. I must tell you that I'm a man with a mission.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
Another day, another pipeline goes kablooey.
U.S. pipelines now rupturing faster than we can keep track of them.
The two brokered a new nuclear deal allowing U.S. companies to provide India with reactors for commercial purposes.
Obama's trip to India, a boost to nuclear energy.
We have the window of opportunity.
International Monetary Fund calls for an end to fossil fuel subsidies, plus some good news. Fracking banned in Scotland, and a red fox returns to Yosemite.
All of those returns and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Yosemite National Park says a rare Sierra Nevada red fox has been sighted in the park for the first time in nearly 100 years.
Oh, this is a big one. You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
For listeners old enough to get that joke, you're welcome. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air, and even as pipelines are still rupturing all over the country, the U.S. Senate, it seems, has now finally passed a bill to force the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yep, it goes back to the House now, but they still don't have enough votes yet in the Senate to override a promised presidential veto, so it's just more theater.
And for the record, the 9 Democrats who are joining all of the Republicans in the U.S. Senate to support Keystone XL pipeline, that would be Senators Michael Bennet of Colorado, Tom Carper of Delaware, Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, Joe Donnelly of Indiana, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Claire McCaskill of Missouri, John Tester of Montana, and Mark Warner of Virginia. All of those Democrats calling for the dirtiest oil in the world to be shipped from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico to be shipped overseas for maybe 50 permanent jobs for a Canadian company.
Yeah.
Thanks, Democrats.
And a correction. Earlier this week, we mistakenly reported that there were 4 pipeline ruptures in the month of January alone in the U.S., but actually, we were wrong.
Who does your fact-checking, Desi Doyen?
In fact, there have been 5 pipeline ruptures in the month of January.
Oh, man, so it's worse than even you thought.
Yep, and there's a reason for these pipeline problems. An investigation on pipeline safety and oversight from the National Transportation and Safety Board released this week found, quote, systemic flaws. Not only are gas companies failing to conduct inspections and tests on their aging pipelines in populated areas, but the states have inconsistent regulations and not enough trained inspectors.
And by not enough, you mean sometimes none at all.
Right. Sometimes those states don't inspect any of them. President Obama's recent trip to India concluded with no climate agreement, unlike his recent historic emissions deal with China. India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, is not ready to commit to emissions cuts, but the two leaders did reach a modest agreement to cooperate on clean energy development and financing. The biggest winners, however, were the U.S. nuclear industry, because Modi agreed to repeal India's liability laws that require nuclear energy companies to pay all the costs of a nuclear accident, and instead will probably foist it off onto India's taxpayers.
So American companies are free to build nuke plants in India now without having to pay up if things go wrong?
That's right.
Nice. Thanks, Obama.
Calls are growing around the world for governments to use the current slump in oil prices to phase out fossil fuel subsidies.
We have the window of opportunity. The price of oil has gone down significantly and probably for a period of time. Now is the time to actually remove the world over the subsidies to use of energy.
Well, who was that hippie leftist calling for the end of fossil fuel subsidies?
That was the director of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, the world spends about $550 billion a year on fossil fuel subsidies. U.S. taxpayers shell out $5 billion to the oil industry in permanent tax breaks.
So the call is stop helping out these oil companies. They're doing fine. They don't need our help anymore. Put that money elsewhere where it can actually do some good.
That's right. Finally, some good news. Fracking has just been banned in Scotland. The temporary moratorium will allow the Scottish government to conduct scientific studies on environmental impacts. Pennsylvania's new Democratic governor, Tom Wolf, has also banned fracking in state parks and forests. And finally, the rare and elusive Sierra Nevada red fox has been spotted in Yosemite National Park for the first time in nearly 100 years. It's one of the rarest animals in North America. Likely fewer than 50 remain.
Wow, just 50. Nonetheless, some good news there. Thank you very much, Desi Doyen. For more good news and occasionally some bad news, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com, where we are now celebrating our 11th anniversary of independent troublemaking and muckraking. But we need your help to continue. Please stop on by and consider a donation to help us do exactly that. Find us and follow us on the Twitters and the Facebooks at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
One of these days I'm gonna blow my top, and that sucker, he's gonna pay. Lord, I can't wait to see their faces when I get the nerve to say, take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. A woman done left, took all the...
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. How do we go from take this job and shove it to, oh, thank you, sir. May I lose another benefit? Or may I, yes, sir. I'll take another pay cut. How do we go from that? It's one of those things that just, kind of leaves you scratching your head going, at some point, you've got to come back together. Just a thought. Just a thought. And I love the right-wing arguments on unemployment. We talked about this the other day. And I got a couple of emails on this going, see, you kick those lazy people off and they go get jobs. The reality is they don't, because there aren't jobs there to be had. That's the problem. If there were jobs everywhere, then they would go get jobs. Problem is you're still at a point where you got 2.5 people for every job opening. That means someone gets left out. So the folks over at the Center for American Progress have taken on probably to something I've said in the past, which is we need to make government the employer of last resort, or at least have a program where people go to get jobs. Again, going back to the early 60s with A. Philip Randolph saying, we don't want handouts, we want jobs programs. We don't want welfare, we don't want that stuff, we want jobs. Give us work, so that we can earn our own money and we can have communities that are built up with people who have self-respect and dignity and all of those things. Because my mother always said, idle hands, the devil's works in idle hands. And it is. So you look at, a lot of the news that's going on in the black community, upwards of 30% unemployment for young black males. And you wonder why there are problems. You look at young people in general, unemployment through the roof. What they need, jobs. And the folks over at the Center for American Progress have put out this idea of a subsidized jobs program for the 21st century. I've always said, look, there are tons of things out there that need to be done. Tons. Lots of stuff that's not being done that need to be done. We should pay somebody to do it. We do away with the welfare. We do away with all of the handout programs. You want to eat? You got to work. Got to do something. Because I think it gives people dignity. I think it gives people a purpose to wake up. And I think it's good for one, self-esteem, but two, good for society where everybody's pulling in the same direction. So that you don't then have, the Scott Wagners of the world with nonsense like this.
The other problem we have is that we have given out so many government benefits over the last 5 years that we have more people riding the wagon than pulling the wagon.
More people riding in the wagon than pulling the wagon, which is nonsense. But it's a nice sound bite, isn't it? It's right up there with pull up their pants and need an alarm clock, right? I love that one too.
But there are a couple things required. Number one, you would have to have an alarm clock and you would have to be able to get out of bed. You would be able to have to pass a drug test.
Yeah, that's
you
another
would
one.
have to have some work ethic.
Another one of my favorite frames. All those people who are unemployed are drug addicts, even though we know that's not the case. But for me, this idea of a public works program, a government as the employer of last resort, I think is a good idea. It would give people, like I said, the opportunity to get some jobs. It would help people who have disabilities. It would help older workers who have been displaced in the workforce, who are last ones to get hired usually. It would help get past some of those barriers. For instance, you know yourself, if you've been out of work for 3-4 months, some people 6 months, a year, you become perpetually unemployed because they go, well, you've been off for 6 months. You've been unemployed for 6 months. We're going to move on to somebody else because they got the pick of the litter. They can choose anyone they want. And as my old man always told me, he goes, look, at the end of the day, take whatever you can get because it's easier getting a job when you've already got one. It's just like, he said, this is my grandfather speaking, but he says, it's just like having a girlfriend. Once you've got one, it's always easier to get another. When you don't have a girlfriend, it's hard to get one. I guess things don't change. But here's the thing. I mean, at the end of it, this is a good idea because it will pump money into the economy. It'll give people jobs. It'll give people self-dignity. And my favorite part of it, it'll tighten the labor pool a little bit, which may act to buoy some of the wages up. Because, if you buy what the conservatives sell, that a tight labor market increases wages, supply demand kind of thing. You tighten up the supply, the demand goes up a little bit. Seems like a good idea. Also, what they point out in their research, it might serve as an automatic economic stabilizer. That if you have another economic downturn, you have these jobs that don't go away. That they're still subsidized. People are still working. You don't take money out of the economy. You don't have that big crash like we did. And I kind of go back to what I said, in 2008. We should have something of an unemployment system to where employers are able to cut back to 32 hours or 30 hours or 20 hours and still keep people employed and with a little bit of benefit to make up the difference so we don't have this massive drop-off. This seems like a smart thing. Problem is, it's a nice idea. Republicans are never going to go for it. Because for them, it's all about, well, screw those poor people. I want mine. Yeah, I want mine. It's a good thought anyway. Quick break. Right back.
After all, something as simple as rock and roll would save us all. Now who'd have thought that after all, it was rock and roll.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
When it comes to pursuing their prey, sharks are master maneuverers. Loan sharks, that is. These days, this usurious species goes by the less threatening name of payday lenders. But they are no less voracious, targeting folks in rough financial straits and luring them with easy money come-ons. With lethal interest rates of more than 700%, automatic renewal clauses, and other razor-sharp gotchas, a $500 payday loan can sink a hapless borrower thousands of dollars into debt. That's why states have been restricting the sharks' interest rate gouging and entrapment techniques. But with a flip of their tails, many payday lenders are simply swimming around state laws by operating online and offshore from such regulatory safe harbors as the Bahamas, the Isle of Man, and Malta. From there, sharks can make loans, then begin devouring their borrowers' bank accounts, even in states that ban such loans. How can shady operators pull off billions of dollars worth of these devious and maybe illegal transactions each year? With inside help from such pillars of the financial establishment as Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo. Of course, these upstanding corporate citizens don't dirty their hands or reputations by making these predatory loans, but they willingly allow offshore sharks to tap directly into the borrower's checking accounts and withdraw unconscionable interest payments electronically and mercilessly. There's a 4-letter F word for what the banks are doing to their own depositors: fees. Automatic withdrawals by the sharks can cause a tsunami of overdrafts in a borrower's bank account, and banks happily collect fat fees for every overdraft. This is Jim Hightower saying, for more information and action, go to responsiblelending.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown.
the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Your proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
So, interesting week so far, and good. I'm glad it's Friday. Thank goodness. Looking forward to the weekend. Looking forward to the big game. But two proposals running around the Pennsylvania State Senate this week to raise the minimum wage. The first one by Democratic Senator Tina Tartaglione, Senate Bill 195, that, as I understand it, would raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour by July of 2016. So you're talking a year and a half, about a year and a half or so. Also, add in, as I understand it, an index. They would index it to inflation, an automatic adjuster that as inflation goes up, wages go up with it, so that everyone has it constant. That the low wage workers don't see their wages eroded by inflation, and thus, and I would argue, everybody else along the pay scale. So if you don't make $8-9 an hour, if you make much more than that now, you should be behind the Tartaglione plan, because eventually this acts as a kind of a boost for everybody, because that's just how it seems to work. You have the people at the bottom who make a little bit, and then a little bit more as you get higher into the job market. The other plan by the Republican Senator Scott Wagner, which we've talked about a couple of times on the program, would raise the minimum wage over, I guess, by 2017. And I don't know when in 2017, but in the next 3 years, it would raise it to $8.75. So they're talking 50 cents a year until it hits $8.75 from the $7.25 now. Wagner's plan doesn't have an automatic adjuster in it. It doesn't have that index for inflation. So in 2017, whatever that already behind the 8-ball minimum wage continues, it'll be another several years before that increases, which means that you fall further behind. Also, he has thrown in a little wrinkle that I'm sure the fast food industry and the restaurant association and those folks were begging for, which is a training wage for anyone under 18 years old of $7.25, and that never goes up. And as I said the other day, one of my concerns about this training wage logic is that the training wage for people under 18, I gotta think, can be changed to a training wage to anyone under 30, or just flat out a training wage. Because I seem to remember back, when it went up to $5.25, there was a training wage, like a training period. I gotta go back and check that, but I seem to remember there was something like that for a short period of time that fortunately got thrown away. But I look at this and you go, you look at the two very different plans, and this is, if you're a low wage worker, this should be your voter's guide, really. If you're somebody this is your voter guide. This is telling you which person, which party cares about you. And I would argue that Wagner does not. Just a thought. But you look at the numbers, and with the falling of the minimum wage from I guess it would have been close to $11 an hour had it kept up with inflation. Had back in '68 they indexed it to inflation, it'd be close to $11 an hour right now, which I think would have been a good thing all through the '80s. Would have been a really great thing. Because then it wouldn't have been completely eroded. But what we've seen in this country is a massive redistribution of wealth from the people who work to the people who basically move money from one pocket to the other. And here in Pennsylvania, the Keystone Research Center just came out with a new report that points out that the average income of Pennsylvanians grew by 40% between 1979 and 2007. You go, wow, that's great. Grew by 40%. Where's mine? There's the problem. Where's mine is kind of the problem. The top 1%, according to the folks at the Keystone Research Center, the top 1% snarled about 180, close to 185% of that 40%, while the folks at the rest of us saw our incomes grow by about 25%. The top 1% share of all growth was almost 43%. It was almost a 43% change in income, if I'm getting this right. And you go through, and they basically go through and they say, look, the numbers are simple. As workers' power to negotiate goes down, the handful, they do much better. It's pretty simple to me. And I would look at someone like Scott Wagner and go, there you go. But, since the Great Recession, and this is the number that really stuck with me, since the Great Recession, the so-called recovery, the top 1%, they recovered quite nicely. They gathered, their incomes grew, I guess, by something like almost 29%, 28.6%. While the rest of us, now this is the part that's, amazing. Since the Great Recession, the end of the recession, we've seen our incomes actually shrink. We've actually gone back a little over 1%. So when you start and you look at this stuff, you go, wow, how is that possible? Well, it's possible in a lot of ways. Being 50th in the nation in job creation. Can you explain to me how freezing? See, this is what I love. The other day I talked about unemployment and how the right was saying that if we just kick people off of it, we shrink the benefit, it's going to create more jobs. Here in Pennsylvania, we did that. We froze the unemployment benefit to, I think it was 2008 levels. 2008 levels, and it's frozen for a decade. So we did that. We shrank the benefit, but we're still 50th in job creation. That doesn't kind of hold up. But the folks at the Keystone Research Center took a look at inequality, and they looked at the inequality from county to county, the share of the top 1%, collecting, seeing their income change, their income growth just explode. And according to their report, you've got a lopsided income growth from 79 to 2007, extended through 2012, where the top 1% saw 167% growth. The bottom 99% saw about 10% of that. They claimed the top 1% share of all growth was 61% during that time frame. But they went county by county, and they looked at the most unequal counties. And the ones who, where you just had the massive gap, the two Americas, if you will, or the two Pennsylvanias, or the two Potter counties, which evidently Potter County is the most unequal county in the state. And I would have to think that has everything to do with the gas boom. But the numbers just massively, just well apart from each other. And you go down the list of the most unequal counties, being Allegheny, Montgomery, Delaware, Chester, your Philadelphia area, Erie, Warren Burks, and Washington, also part of Pittsburgh. And then the most unequal, or the least unequal counties, Cameron, which I had to look up. I wasn't sure where that is. They're fairly close. Columbia, Mifflin, Bedford, basically places where where rich people don't want to live. And, you could argue, places where welfare programs are pretty prevalent. Kind of like the South. But I look at this and I got to go, at some point, don't we have to take these kind of numbers into account and start thinking about, how do we fix this? Just a thought. I mean, at some level. And I go back to that minimum wage thing. Really, two very different plans. Two diametrically opposing plans, polar opposites, that one will do virtually nothing. And they know that. This is, I think from the Republican side, it's just a way to put the issue behind them. And on the Democratic side, it's a way to really actually help our economy. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about a state like ours where you see this inequality, that means that somebody's going to have to take a little bit less. And understand, the top 1%, they're not willing to do that. They're just not. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. You can always email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Also, next Friday, After the Keystone Progress Summit, we're going to be doing our meetup with our friends at the Raging Chicken Press over at Anthony's Microbrew and Pizzeria, I guess. But we're going to be there. Hope you put that on your calendar. Quick break, right back.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. California port truck drivers employed by Pace Cartage have won a court judgment of over $2 million plus interest and attorney fees in a Port of Los Angeles, Long Beach wage theft case. The court ruled that they were employees, not independent contractors. Attorney Alvin M. Gomez.
The court awarded almost $2.1 million, plus there's going to be interest on that amount for the past 2 years, plus attorney fees and costs, which should exceed over $1.5 million on top of the $2.1 million.
Gomez says the independent contractor issue played a major role in this case. That's when companies misclassify workers as contractors when they are in reality employees.
Companies employ schemes in order to avoid the payment of employment tax, workers' comp, insurance, all those things that an employee should have, and they come with a scheme in order to profit from the hard work of those who actually do the work, and the companies profit by stealing the wages of these employees.
Gomez says that Pace is appealing the California Superior Court ruling. The Rebuild America Act, a 5-year plan to rebuild America's infrastructure, would spend $1 trillion in a bid to create roughly 13 million jobs. That's what U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders intends with his bill introduced this week. The AFL-CIO backs the bill, as does the American Society of Civil Engineers. Senator Barbara Mikulski co-sponsored the Rebuild America Act. The bill would make specific targeted investments over a 5-year period to rebuild roads, bridges, passenger and freight rail, transit, broadband, the electrical grid, and national parks. The AFL-CIO says this is a blueprint of what to do about our crumbling infrastructure and would create millions of jobs. U.S. Representative Mark Pocan is strongly against fast-track authority for the proposed Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. Pocan says this deal is a bad deal for workers in many ways, and Congress should not give up its constitutional responsibility and authority on the TPP.
We're going to protect the environment, if we're going to protect American workers, if we're going to protect our food safety and our medications that come into this country, we're going to protect our sovereignty to have local laws like Buy American and Buy Local. We need to know what's in this trade deal, and giving up our responsibility as members of Congress to actually debate and to amend this is a bad deal.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. Bank of Labor offers a business Visa card with no annual fee and points earned with every purchase, as well as rental vehicle and travel accident insurance. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
And brought to you in part by unionjobs.com, listing open positions with unions, socially allied groups, and community organizations. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
So this is not some isolated incident where one governor is just off in his own program. This is part of a national strategy, and they figured they could do it in Wisconsin, they can do it in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Michigan, Ohio, and elsewhere.
Well, people gonna give you hell, take it back in 2012. Hang on, Wisconsin, hang on, oh, hang on, Wisconsin.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. I remember when, February 2011, when all the craziness broke out in Wisconsin, and we headed out there to sleep in the Capitol. We were out there for 9 days on the concrete floor in February in Wisconsin. I got to tell you, it was cold, absolutely cold. But, I remember saying, look, the reason we're here and the reason we're doing this is all of this insanity that you're seeing. All of the attacks on workers, the attacks on education, the attacks on the commons. This is ground zero. This is where it's going to emanate from, and it's going to go all across the country with all of these crazy right-wing governors like Scott Walker and Paul LePage and Rick Scott and Rick Snyder and Tom Corbett. Fortunately he's gone. But you're going to see all this craziness, and it's only going to get worse. And I've been saying, you should be gearing up for this. And this was back in 2011. Here we are, 2015, and just about everywhere you look, there's a crazy right-wing somebody pushing the no rights at work agenda. And now I understand in New Mexico, the woman that I thought I'm still betting my money on is going to be the VP poll. Looks like she's got herself in a little pickle. So here to talk about that, I've got Jane Carter. She is a labor economist with AFSCME. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I see my pick for VP, maybe a little bump in the road.
Well, yeah. I mean, they've got both. They've got the House. They don't have the Senate, but she's been pushing right to work for a while, and so have the Republicans in New Mexico. So, but it's there. It's alive and well. Right to work was introduced, and they had a hearing on it yesterday. With, from what we hear, 4 people in support of right to work and multiple people in opposition of right to work. But prior to the committee hearing, there was a bit of a scandal that erupted pretty quickly. Our friends at Progress Now, New Mexico, were able to obtain some documents from Paul Gessing, who's out of the Rio Grande Foundation, which is an affiliate of State Policy Network, which is part of the entire ALEC and Koch brothers funded organization.
Kind of like our Commonwealth Foundation here.
Yes. That would be their sister organization. Yes. And back in 2012, this email that Progress Now New Mexico obtained has Paul Gessing basically to other attorneys and politicos in New Mexico, and I quote, saying, "We need a sugar daddy to fund a report pushing right to work."
A sugar daddy?
And this quote, sugar daddy to fund this. Yes. So, and they got it. They got a report saying how great right to work would be for New Mexico and how wonderful it would be. But the data was all either, based in from 1985 to the early 90s and completely ignored Oklahoma, which is a really good example to look to. And when, it was what you get what you pay for,
Yeah, that's what a sugar daddy will get you.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: if that was supposed to be the greatest thing, why they're already one of the poorest states in the country?
Right.
I mean, I don't see how they're already one of the poorest states with one of the lowest wages. I'm sorry, I'm missing the point.
Well, I think it's a concerted effort. I mean, we've seen it all over. I'm sure your listeners have heard about in Kentucky. They filed right to work locally at different counties.
In a county that actually has no union members.
So the first county that filed was Warren County, which actually is home to the UAW Corvette plant.
Right, but one of the counties, and I forget, I'll have to look it up, but one of them...
One of the 6, the last one that they just filed, I think is Logan, has
exactly.
no union members. Right. Yeah. But it's this effort, Wisconsin, you're just talking about it. Wisconsin, we can expect to see it filed early next week, even though there had been a push not to file it there. And they also launched or are pushing legislation to see if they can just run right to work locally in Milwaukee only. So completely ignoring the federal laws. And
just yesterday we talked about the guy from Illinois wanting to have right to work zones.
Right, which is an ALEC model bill. That's an ALEC model legislation, right.
But isn't all of this emanating from, I mean, really honestly and truthfully, isn't all of this emanating from that, that ALEC type model coming from the Koch brothers and their ilk being disseminated through all of their right-wing governors that they control?
Yeah, I mean, you see it popped up. They filed it in Connecticut. They filed it in Wisconsin or Washington State. They filed it. It's like it seems to be coming up in every single state. And it's kind of, you look at who attended the ALEC conferences last year, who attended the recent one here in DC in December, and it's those are the folks who went back home and had their marching orders.
So then the question that came up yesterday when I spoke with Bob Bruno from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, he said, if the zone thing worked, if they're allowed to do it, couldn't you then have collective bargaining zones where you go into these right to work states and pass local ordinances and local things and say we only allow collective bargaining?
Well, I mean, I would leave that to the attorneys, but I think that when it comes down to it, the federal law is pretty specific. The cities and counties cannot do this, and so I think we win on that argument. But when it comes, at the end of the day, we all know, all of us know that one, right to work does not increase economic growth. It does not increase your local economy. It does not increase the buying power of your neighbors. In fact, it does the complete opposite of that. And when you have these folks who say right to work is a big deal for companies who want to relocate to an area, when it actually, that's not true. We the Albuquerque Journal just put out a great piece and talked to 3 of the biggest industry site selectors in the country,
right.
And they said that that's actually 1980s thinking, that companies don't even put that on the list. It might be a check off on a box, but it's not one of consideration anymore, because they don't want they want better education, and right to work states spend less money per pupil. About $4,000 less per pupil. Companies want to have good infrastructure, and a lot of right-to-work states do not spend the money on infrastructure that's needed. They have less of a skilled workforce. Right-to-work states have lower-paying jobs, less skilled workforce. They don't want that. They're going to go to places, pay higher wages, because they want a better infrastructure. They want to be able to go someplace where you've got good schools, good roads, good bridges, and a workforce that actually is capable and competent to do the job.
Yeah. The site location people that I've known over the years, they all say the 5 things that they look for are obviously location, 1 through 3. And then, as you pointed out, an educated workforce and an infrastructure. And,
right.
and to me, it's not taxes and all the other things that were being thrown out. That really wasn't even on the list. Now, the sweeteners and the handouts that we give, that we seem to have to give out, that just seems to be part of the equation. But at the end of the day, it's about your location. It's about your workforce, whether they're at the bottom or the top end, and it's about the infrastructure.
Well, yeah, I was originally from Oklahoma. I was raised in Oklahoma, and I was it passed right to work passed Oklahoma in 2001. And you look at the manufacturing, and it's actually depleted. It's not the promises that were made of all these great jobs coming to the state did not come. What came were the oil and gas industry, because Oklahoma is an oil and gas state. That's the only reason there's a job increase there. You want to talk about tax incentives? You look at Kansas, that just completely decimated their tax structure, and they've got some of the worst job growth in the country right now, and obviously in the worst state budget and tax or gaps that they're facing right now. All of these ideas of these sweeteners and no taxes, that's not it. It comes down to, do you have an educated workforce, and can we actually build a good company here? And if you have an uneducated workforce, they're not going to come.
I'm with you. So let me ask you this, because one of the positions I've taken is, all of this push for the no rights at work agenda in places like Connecticut and in places where it's never going to pass or it's not going to pass right now. It seems more about busy work and keeping the unions fighting for just to hold on to that stuff, so that they're not actually out there organizing and bringing more people in and telling their story. I think it's just about keeping workers on the defensive.
Well, it's funny you say that, because actually this a longtime spokesperson of the National Right to Work Committee, Stephen Greer, even said we're not purporting to prove that right to work produces superior economic performance. So you've got one of their national spokespersons saying, yeah, this really isn't about the economy. It's pretty much to attack and bust unions.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's still about, in my view, it's about punishing working people. And even if you're not a member of a union, and I've told this to some of my friends who are contractors for the Postal Service, you end up breaking the unions. Your wages go down because your wages were negotiated because of the union contract that allows you to work and do this kind of work. Right. And there's this disconnect that we're all somehow, that 6 degrees of separation. Eventually, we're all connected.
Well, I mean, you look at New Mexico, like you said earlier. It's not a wealthy state, right? It really isn't, and it's also because it has a pretty low union density. There's only the AFL-CIO reports around 10,000 to 15,000 union members.
Right.
But and you look at other states that have high density rates, and you have a much richer society of wealthier workers in those places where you have more union density because of the trickle around, the spreading of the wealth, I think. And when you have a good union contract, they have to compete some way. If it's a company that doesn't have a union, they have to compete to get workers, and so they're going to pay higher wages. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's we set a standard, and other employers follow that.
Yeah. The other thing that I often say is that this whole push towards destroying unions is about destroying democracy and that participatory democracy. Because I tend to find, and this is my own anecdotal study, I tend to find that union members tend to be more conscious of politics and more conscious of having a voice on the job, because I think it's ingrained in them. They're used to it.
Well, it's also it's a union's job to inform their members, and I think unions do a pretty good job of that. I spent some time in Ohio back during SB5, and Senator Sherrod Brown actually had a really good story to tell, that when he went to a non-union plant or facility, he would get blasted about really social social issues, and that didn't really have anything to do with folks' work or impacting their wages or the safety on the job. But the moment he stepped into a union plant or a union household, even, it was all about the economy. That folks who seemed to be, working middle class folks could have a really good, interesting conversation about economic policy that would affect them, not just their work sites, but their state and the country alone. So it comes down to unions actually informing their members not only of what's going on at their work site, but everything else that could affect them and will affect them and affect their neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, and I guess that's where my thinking's always been. It's about the economic issues. It's about making sure that you can put a meal on the table and a roof over my kid's head. That's most important. And then all the other things down the road we can discuss. But first and foremost, it's about how we take care of our families.
Well, in the BLS data that just came out last week was fantastic. It's, on average, a union member makes more than $200 more a week than a non-union member. That's more than $10,000 a year.
Wow.
That's a lot of money.
And I think that's exactly why we're seeing these union busting tactics all across the country. And I'm fully expecting here in Pennsylvania, as they keep pushing for the paycheck deception first, but I fully expect right to work to be somewhere in the mix as well.
Dale had the meeting here. Alec had the meeting here in Washington, D.C. in December, and it was one of the main topics of discussion. So I don't think it's these states that we've seen it pop up. I think there's more to come. I don't think we've seen the last of it.
That's why we need to stay prepared, stay vigilant, and keep telling the story. I mean, obviously, you're spot on. I saw the same data that you did. Over $200 a week more than the non-union folks. Also, when you talk about healthcare and retirement security, and then the non-financial things of having the voice on the job, of job security. I mean, there was that study that just came out not too long ago. It said that union members are happier. Of course they're happier. They make a little bit more money and they've got some security. What wouldn't make you happier?
Exactly. And it's not, when I've negotiated contracts, our members, sometimes it's not necessarily about the money. It's about having a say in the job, because our members are the ones who do the work. You want to know where to find efficiencies and a way to do the job better. Ask us. We know how to do it. And having that voice and that dialogue with management actually makes it for an even better work life itself. So it's not just financial. It's about having, this is what we do. We're workers, man, and people like having their voice heard.
Exactly. And that's why I think you guys do such great work. And I know, fortunately, here in Pennsylvania, we got rid of our crazy right-wing governor, even though we expanded the crazy right-wing nonsense in the legislature. But our governor, and this is to his credit, actually threw a reception for all the state workers in the Capitol Rotunda, where he and his wife were out there shaking hands and talking to people and getting their input.
That's really cool.
And that is really cool. And the great thing about him is when he was Secretary of Revenue, I've had numerous people tell me this. He knew absolutely everyone's name in that Department of Revenue.
Oh, wow. That's, and that matters. I think when you have someone who is, who wants to run government, they need to understand how government works and understand the people who work for him, right? Or work in that field. And I think that speaks volumes about what we can hope to expect out of him and moving Pennsylvania forward.
Yeah, I'm with you. I just wish we could expand that to the other crazy states.
Oh, I do too. Being a girl from Oklahoma, you have no idea how much I'd love to have your governor back there.
Yeah, well, or Kansas. I can't believe.
Kansas.
I can't believe what's the matter with Kansas. You saw crazy right-wing policy, and it's killing you. You've given the baby the bathwater, the tub, the spigot. You've given the plug away, everything.
Well, Brownback actually proposed sin tax increases this year, and even Grover Norquist called him out and bashed him in an open letter, that this is going to cost taxpayers even more. And when you've got Grover Norquist attacking you for your taxes and you're Brownback, I mean, you've got a problem. You've got a serious problem.
Well, there you go. But the hope is that this blows up in Martinez's face, and because I've been saying she's going to be the VP poll. Maybe this saves my prediction.
I think she's the darling of the right now, and I think we'll see if we can keep our allies in the Senate and see how things go that way. But this could actually, I think New Mexico is going to be a little bit harder than a lot of folks thought.
It's going to be an interesting look for the next couple of weeks. But the sugar daddy thing just kind of blows my mind.
And the rest of the email went on to say that they hope they can find it, and they quote, a Democrat dumb enough to vote for it. And they found one. Yes, there was a Democrat who voted yesterday for it out of committee.
Isn't there always?
Yeah, we can't. So we have to fight for ourselves.
That's it. And I say take it to the streets. Jane, I appreciate you taking time for us and filling us in, and I'd love to have you come back again soon.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jane Carter, labor economist over at AFSCME. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. That's funny. Sugar. Yeah, well, right back.
I might be down for a moment, but I always go back. It's time for war. It's time for war. It's time for war. It's time for war. It's time for war.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. What follows is for those who want to change the world from what it is to what they believe it should be. Those words were penned in the opening paragraph of the book Rules for Radicals, whose author, Saul Alinsky, was born on this day in labor history. The year was 1909. Saul Alinsky became one of the most famous community organizers in Chicago and even U.S. history. Alinsky was born to Jewish immigrants. He earned his degree in archaeology from the University of Chicago, but could not find work due to the Great Depression. His first turn at organizing was that of a part-time labor organizer for the Congress of Industrial Organizations. Soon, he left labor organizing for a more broad-based community organizing. He worked in the back of the yards, forming the Back of the Yards Council, which became a prototype for scores of community organizations. In 1940, Alinsky formed the Industrial Areas Foundation, which served as a leader in community organizing training. He traveled the country helping to form similar community organizations. He then worked with African American organizations, most notably helping to found Chicago's Woodland Organization. The Woodland Organization took on issues such as segregated housing and community health. The Woodland Organization remains active to this day. Alinsky's Rules for Radicals became a guidebook for organizing strategies for countless campaigns. A Time magazine article claimed that American democracy is being altered by Alinsky's ideas, and National Review magazine founder William F. Buckley said Alinsky was, quote, very close to being an organizational genius. At the core of his book are 12 straightforward maxims. For example, a good tactic is one your people enjoy. Another is keep the pressure on, never let up. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We're talking about the 1860 Republican Convention. Senator William Seward was sure to win. But Abraham Lincoln and his operatives had at the last minute become the only obstacle to Seward's victory. Using railroad company contacts, Lincoln got discount fares for his supporters to travel to the convention. Lincoln's team also printed counterfeit tickets to the convention and gave them to Lincoln supporters with instructions to show up early. By the time Lincoln's name was put into nomination, the hall was full of his supporters and the roar was explosive. On the first ballot, Seward's best chance to win, he only received 173 votes. Lincoln had 102, and no one else was close. By the fourth ballot, Lincoln was only 2 votes short, and the Ohio delegation chairman announced the switch of 4 Ohio votes to the man from Illinois. Biography, deal-making, and casting Lincoln as a second choice had taken him to victory. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Prevailing wage was actually discriminatory when it started. I don't think we need to go into the full history of that, but it was definitely meant to keep construction projects local. And we are now in pretty much of a global economy.
It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. and I feel fine.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Labor Chairman Ron Miller there. That's discriminatory, and they want to keep those jobs local. How dare they want that? You know what's interesting to me? All the people who are pushing this poison, all this no rights at work, this stuff, all across the country. It's the same rhetoric. It's the same mantra. And I've been saying, look, I'm sure at one point you could make an argument, not a really good one, but you could make an argument that if you were one of the first right to work states, that you might be able to steal jobs from other states because you could say, well, look, you can really abuse our workers here. We'd let you do that if you just came. What happens when the entire country does this? Well, then what do you end up with? Well, you then end up with, as Jane Carter pointed out, union members make about $200 a week, a little more than $200 a week more than their non-union counterparts. What you then have is you have not only that $200 going down so that the union members fall to where the non-union members are, you also have the non-union members falling even further and taking with them the former union members. So you have this constant falling downward. And we've seen this play out. We've seen this play out in other states where it's happened. I mean, in Michigan, just the numbers they came out with. The number of union members dropped, yes, but also the number of jobs dropped. It didn't create the jobs that they were saying it was going to, because they didn't steal them from Wisconsin, they didn't steal them from Illinois, they didn't steal them from Ohio, they didn't get to steal anything. All they did was steal wages from workers who were making decent money. And I'm telling you, it's going to get worse. As the current contracts that are in place expire, it's going to get worse. So the poison they keep pushing at us, it doesn't pan out. And one of the latest ones, the ones you hear often, is the prevailing wage. And we're going to hear about this here in Pennsylvania quite often over the next couple of months, because there's already people saying, well, we need to do away with prevailing wage for schools and for hospitals and for this and for that. And my favorite one from Representative Brad Roy, for the children. We need to do it for the children, especially the children of the children of people who have died in war. I mean, could you get any lower? Probably not. No, not there anyway. But in West Virginia, they're doing the same thing. I mean, it's going all across the country. A number of states that have prevailing wage laws still, they're going after them, saying, if we could just do away with that, we could just lower. Here's the argument. If we could just lower wages, if we could just cut our workers' wages, it would save us money. Think about that for a second. Talk amongst yourselves, because the reality is that means you too, because when their wages fall, that means money that they're not spending in the local economy, which means economic activity slows a little bit, which means you might get laid off. I've had this argument numerous times with small business owners that I know in town. I remember when Lear was pitching a 50% pay cut. The guy goes, well, they make too much money anyway. And I go, you do know whose money that they're taking, don't you? They're taking your money. Those workers who used to come in here, well, Lear closed up shop after they became, I think it was IIC or IMC or something like that. And that guy went out of business within a couple of months because those workers that used to come in there and be patrons didn't. And he went belly up. So taking money out of the economy to me is a bad idea. Anyway, in West Virginia, the good folks at the I forget the name of the group already. The people with the, I'll get to it. The West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. They have put out a 10-page study on what repealing prevailing wage in the great state of West Virginia would do to the workers there who currently have those jobs. And look, it's lowering wages, it's cutting benefits, it's creating a transient workforce. So you're going to have the good skilled craftsmen who are there now leaving for other places where they maybe find better jobs, which means that you're going to lose that you're going to have that brain drain, as we've seen in other states that have done this. You have that brain drain of people going, hey, I'm going to take my skills and go do something else. You'll have a transient workforce who, I got to be honest, I like the fact that the guy who builds my kid's school, his kid may be sitting in the same classroom as mine. Just a thought. Because if the roof falls in, it's his kid's head too. Somebody just coming through, let's slap something together so I can make a couple of bucks and move on to the next one. I am a little leery about that. But they point out in this 10-page report by the good folks over at the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy that they looked at the construction costs for elementary and secondary schools, also looked at university costs, and, well, golly, looky there. The costs of building in West Virginia was actually $6.10 per square foot cheaper than they were in North Carolina, Ohio, and Virginia. So they found it was actually cheaper in West Virginia with the prevailing wage. So what do Republicans want? They want even cheaper than that. It's because maybe you can steal workers from other states. Now, what people are saying who are in support, like I am, of prevailing wage, when you have these highly trained, highly skilled workers who go through rigorous training programs and apprenticeships that are paid for by the unions, which I'm all in favor of, and the contractors, they both join together. What you have are more productivity. And there's a picture going around on Facebook of someone who evidently put in 2 urinals in a corner. So they put both urinals on each wall in a corner. So I guess you stand in the middle and maybe you can pick one. But 2 of you can't go at once. And it goes to show, hey, well, it's where they told me to do it. As where somebody who knows what they're doing goes, no, I don't think so. But at the end of the day, what the folks at the West Virginia Budget and Policy Center have said is, look, you're gonna lose a skilled workforce. You're going to end up with more serious injuries because we know that prevailing wage laws help cut down on the number of serious injuries. And the reality is workers who stay are going to lose retirement benefits, are going to lose health care benefits, and overall, it's a negative for society. And the reality is, I agree. So when you hear this come up, and we're going to hear it coming up here in Pennsylvania, you got to put it right back down. And you got to throw it right back in the face of these right-wing corporate Republicans who all they want is more for them and less for everybody else. At least that's my view on it. I'd be curious your thoughts. Let me know. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Working class heroes, they are the ones who helped to build this land. Working class heroes, they stay united, always hand in hand. Working class heroes, with hearts of gold, that always shine so bright.
Another day, another pipeline goes kablooey.
U.S. pipelines now rupturing faster than we can keep track of them.
The two brokered a new nuclear deal allowing U.S. companies to provide India with reactors for commercial purposes.
Obama's trip to India, a boost to nuclear energy.
We have the window of opportunity.
International Monetary Fund calls for an end to fossil fuel subsidies. Plus, some good news. Fracking banned in Scotland, and a red fox returns to Yosemite.
All of those returns and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Yosemite National Park says a rare Sierra Nevada red fox has been sighted in the park for the first time in nearly 100 years.
Oh, this is a big one. You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
For listeners old enough to get that joke, you're welcome. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air and even as pipelines are still rupturing all over the country, the U.S. Senate, it seems, has now finally passed a bill to force the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yep, it goes back to the House now, but they still don't have enough votes yet in the Senate to override a promised presidential veto. So it's just more theater.
And for the record, the 9 Democrats who are joining all of the Republicans in the U.S. Senate to support Keystone XL pipeline, that would be Senators Michael Bennet of Colorado, Tom Carper of Delaware, Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, Joe Donnelly of Indiana, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Claire McCaskill of Missouri, John Tester of Montana, and Mark Warner of Virginia. All of those Democrats calling for the dirtiest oil in the world to be shipped from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico to be shipped overseas for maybe 50 permanent jobs for a Canadian company.
Yeah.
Thanks, Democrats.
And a correction. Earlier this week, we mistakenly reported that there were 4 pipeline ruptures in the month of January alone in the U.S., but actually, we were wrong.
Who does your fact-checking, Desi Doyen?
In fact, there have been 5 pipeline ruptures in the month of January.
Oh, man, so it's worse than even you thought.
Yep, and there's a reason for these pipeline problems. An investigation on pipeline safety and oversight from the National Transportation and Safety Board released this week found, quote, systemic flaws. Not only are gas companies failing to conduct inspections and tests on their aging pipelines in populated areas, but the states have inconsistent regulations and not enough trained inspectors.
And by not enough, you mean sometimes none at all.
Right. Sometimes those states don't inspect any of them. President Obama's recent trip to India concluded with no climate agreement, unlike his recent historic emissions deal with China. India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, is not ready to commit to emissions cuts, but the two leaders did reach a modest agreement to cooperate on clean energy development and financing. The biggest winners, however, were the U.S. nuclear industry, because Modi agreed to repeal India's liability laws that require nuclear energy companies to pay all the costs of a nuclear accident, and instead will probably foist it off onto India's taxpayers.
So American companies are free to build nuke plants in India now without having to pay up if things go wrong?
That's right.
Nice. Thanks, Obama.
Calls are growing around the world for governments to use the current slump in oil prices to phase out fossil fuel subsidies.
We have a window of opportunity. The price of oil has gone down significantly and probably for a period of time. Now is the time to actually remove the world over the subsidies to use of energy.
Well, who was that hippie leftist calling for the end of fossil fuel subsidies?
That was the director of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, the world spends about $550 billion a year on fossil fuel subsidies. U.S. taxpayers shell out $5 billion to the oil industry in permanent tax breaks.
So the call is stop helping out these oil companies. They're doing fine. They don't need our help anymore. Put that money elsewhere where it can actually do some good.
That's right. Finally, some good news. Fracking has just been banned in Scotland. The temporary moratorium will allow the Scottish government to conduct scientific studies on environmental impacts. Pennsylvania's new Democratic governor, Tom Wolf, has also banned fracking in state parks and forests. And finally, the rare and elusive Sierra Nevada red fox has been spotted in Yosemite National Park for the first time in nearly 100 years. It's one of the rarest animals in North America. Likely fewer than 50 remain.
Wow, just 50. Nonetheless, some good news there. Thank you very much, Desi Doyen. For more good news and occasionally some bad news, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com, where we are now celebrating our 11th anniversary of independent troublemaking and muckraking. But we need your help to continue. Please stop on by and consider a donation to help us do exactly that. Find us and follow us on the Twitters and the Facebooks at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Monday morning feels so bad. Everybody seems to nag me. Coming Tuesday, I feel better. Even my old man looks good. Christmas days go so slow. Thursday, I don't know. I got fire on my mind.
And welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. There's still time to reach out to your state representative, to your congressman, to your senator, to stop the fast track. StopFastTrack.com is the website they want you to go to. There's even a thing in there that says, you can enter your phone number and they'll make the call right for you. They can patch you right through to your person, and you can just go, no, I don't want you to do it. Because look, we're coming down to the wire here on this. Orrin Hatch said that by the end of the month they were going to have something in the Senate. I'm told by the end of February the House is going to take it up. This could happen very quickly. Which is why we need to get involved. Let's find out what's going on, though, with trade and a couple other things. It is Our Future Friday, which is why I've asked Isaiah Poole, the online editor over at the Campaign for America's Future, their website, ourfuture.org. Isaiah, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure.
So I understand some good news from the president on the TPP.
He actually took a swipe at us, among other people. Yesterday, he told a group of House Democrats that they should not read the Huffington Post to learn about trade issues. It turns out the reason why he said that, he said, quote, get informed not by reading the Huffington Post. Now, the Huffington Post has been prominently featuring our post by Dave Johnson, who's been a guest on your show, and other people on our team on Fast Track, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and why people should oppose it. So we've upset President Obama enough for him to say, folks, don't read that stuff.
Good for you. And look, I voted for the guy. I like the guy. On this, he's dead wrong. But if I'm sitting in that room with the other Democrats, the first thing I do is I raise my hand and go, okay, I won't read it at the Huffington Post. Give me the damn language. Let me read it for myself.
That's precisely right. And speaking of which, there is going to be in the print edition, I think it's going to be tomorrow's print edition, it's online at the New York Times now. Economist Joseph Stiglitz has a piece on the trade agreement that focuses on the pharmaceutical provisions, the drug companies, Big Pharma. And his issue, again, is the lack of transparency. We don't know what's in the agreements. The piece that we do know is largely because of folks like WikiLeaks, which is leaked some of the discussion documents. But the Stiglitz piece is just one example of what's at stake. He talks about how the provisions in the agreement, as we understand them now, would basically prevent governments, including the United States government, from putting reasonable controls on what pharmaceutical companies can charge for drugs. And what he says is that if governments can't regulate drug prices, the whole world, he says, may come to pay a price in the form of worse health and unnecessary deaths.
Right. But here's the thing, Isaiah. We're Americans. We pay full price. So why shouldn't the rest of the world enjoy that chest-thumping ability that we exceptional Americans get to do and pay overinflated prices?
Well, but the problem is that a lot of, the issue is that a lot of the research and development that goes into making drugs, a significant piece of that is already paid for by the taxpayer.
Right.
It's done at the NIH and it's done at research facilities that are government funded, and the pharmaceutical companies get the benefit of that. Sure, they do their own research, and sure, to the extent to which they put out money, to the extent to which they put out money on research to get a drug, the argument is not over whether they should get a return on their investment. The argument is over whether they not only get a return on their investment, but they're able to extort and milk patients for even more. And in European countries, where the price of drugs is tightly regulated, they go to the pharmaceutical companies and say, look, it costs you X amount to make this drug. We will give you that X amount We'll give you a little bit of profit, but we're not going to give you more.
Right. We used to do that. We used to think that way, didn't we?
Yeah. Yes. And the truth of the matter is that regardless of what the pharmaceutical companies say about, well, if you do that, we won't develop drugs, we won't sell the drugs in this country.
That's nonsense.
In Europe, they sell the drugs.
Yeah.
They make their money. They do just fine.
And, I look at this, Isaiah, and the sad reality is we don't actually know what's in this TPP, which is another reason why I'm opposed to fast track. But we've learned from past agreements what gets into this stuff, and it's about more than just trading widgets and whatnots for gizmos and gadgets. It's more about, as you've said, protecting the profits and increasing them. This idea that we don't negotiate for drug prices in this country is ludicrous, and now taking that to the national level is even worse. And I also understand now you've got Rand Paul and Barbara Boxer who are coming up with this tax scheme so that when this passes, those pharmaceutical companies will be able to hold more of their profits overseas. Am I getting this right?
You're getting it. Yeah. I mean, the intersection of this is pretty interesting, even though they're not directly connected. But Barbara Boxer and Rand Paul, the Democrat from California liberal and Kentucky libertarian, are in on this scheme that is purportedly designed to raise money for roads and bridges and public transportation funding. And the idea is that corporations that have parked profits overseas,
right,
to avoid being taxed by the IRS, can bring that money back into the United States at a deeply discounted tax rate, about 6%.
Repatriation. Love that. Love that name.
Yeah, repatriation. So they get to pay only 6% of that in taxes on that money.
I'm stuck on that word for a second. Doesn't repatriation sound like it's actually patriotic and you can wave the flag and you can salute the flag and it's a good American thing to do, right?
Well, the point is that this is money that more often than not has been sent overseas to begin with to avoid taxation. It's like me sending my paycheck, across the pond to Ireland or Switzerland or some other low-income tax haven or low tax haven.
Or a Pennsylvania business sending their profits to a P.O. box in Delaware, taking advantage of the Delaware loophole where they have those magic boxes that scrub taxes and anything that they would pay back to the state out.
That's a very real example of what's done. And the whole point is to avoid that money being taxed. And often, as Apple's a prime example of this, the money doesn't actually physically leave the country. It's on deposit at Bank of America or Chase or some other U.S. bank. So it's not even outside the country physically, but it's run through a foreign-based subsidiary. When you buy software through Microsoft or Apple or some of these other outlets, often you're not buying from the United States corporation. You're buying from some entity that they've created overseas.
Someplace like Ireland.
Yeah, exactly, so that doesn't get taxed. So the Barbara Boxer Rand Paul plan basically says to those corporations, well, we're going to forgive you for doing that. Just bring that money back at a deeply discounted rate, and we'll put a deeply discounted tax rate on that money, and we'll put the tax money into the Highway Trust Fund, and we'll make you promise that you won't use that money for stock buybacks or executive compensation, boosting executive compensation. We'll ask you to use that money to invest in your business.
We'll ask.
The problem is, and I've talked to a couple of people about this yesterday, a couple of experts who looked at how this worked back in 2004, when in fact the same promises were made, and none of that happened. In fact, corporations that took advantage of the repatriation tax holiday in 2004 actually cut jobs. There was a net loss of jobs. There was certainly a net loss of government revenue. And all the money that was repatriated pretty much went to trying to boost the stock prices of the companies that brought back the money and CEO bonuses and whatnot. Virtually none of it went back into the business reinvestment that these companies said that they would do when they got the tax holiday.
And are you surprised by that? I mean, the reality is, back in 2004, I was saying it's going to happen. We know this is what's going to end up happening. And here we are in the exact same place. I'm curious why they didn't fix that loophole back then so it wouldn't build up like this, because we keep hearing there's like $2 or $3 trillion sitting offshore that we could put back into the economy and create jobs with. Yeah, just like last time.
Yeah, well over $2 trillion at this point. The problem is that the corporate lobbies are so strong here in Washington. There are all sorts of ways to fix that problem. But we've seen Congress time and time again talk about fixing it and never fix it. And the reason why is that the corporate lobbyists have a stranglehold on this whole process.
So how do we stop it?
Change. Well, it will never change until you break that stranglehold.
Right.
And I think as long as we keep electing the jokers that we are electing, it's not going to happen. I think what part of the process starts with education. I think people have to be are increasingly aware of how broken the system is, and there are movements afoot to get money out of politics so that we can have a rational debate about what the tax policy ought to be. And I think we have to, just like we're whacking President Obama on trade, we have to say, President Obama, you have not been responsible in leading this discussion on how to pay for infrastructure. It would make sense. There are lots of things that would make sense, including just simply saying, look, make sure that corporations pay the taxes that they're supposed to pay. Close the loopholes, and we'll put that revenue, some of that revenue, into a highway trust fund. If you don't want to burden drivers with an increase in the gasoline tax, I can understand the argument for that, even though personally I think the gasoline tax can go up a little bit. But if you don't want to do that, fine. Let's make the folk who are spending billions of dollars, millions of dollars, coming up with new and exotic tax loopholes, shut all of that down.
Exactly. So let me ask you the last question here then. So how do we stop this Rand Paul, Barbara Boxer, this plan to repatriate this money back in at a much lower tax rate? Because we know it's not going to work as it's sold. How do we stop it?
Well, the first thing we're doing is we've just put up a petition on ourfuture.org, and Dave Johnson, even though he didn't have enough voice to be on this call, he has written a post on ourfuture.org now that asks people to stop the Rand Paul Barbara Boxer tax giveaway. There's a petition in that post. Click on that post, sign the petition. We'll also put another link directly to the petition on the website before the end of this broadcast. And click that link so that we send a very clear message. If tens, hundreds of thousands of people bombard Barbara Boxer with this, she'll know that the progressive community, who normally she's with, the progressive community is not with her on this one.
Right.
And maybe get that message.
And maybe she'll come out like the president and say, don't go to ourfuture.org to get your tax information.
She's been been a friend and an ally on a lot of issues, but she's just wrong here. Maybe she will back away.
And that's what pressure is going to do. And we'll make sure that we get a link up at thericksmithshow.com so that folks will have a chance to sign up. Isaiah, I appreciate you taking time for us, filling us in on this stuff. We look forward to talking to you again next week.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much, our good friend Isaiah Poole. Campaign for America's Future, ourfuture.org, the website. Go sign the petition. No. Figure out a better way to get that money back here without giving huge handouts to corporate America. Quick break, right back.
You know eternity can't ever change your mind. You know eternity can't ever change your mind. So think before you die. Whoa, think before you die.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. It's time for a trip back in time, but not too far.
We must continue investing in new methods of producing ethanol, using everything from wood chips to grasses to agricultural wastes.
That was President George W. Bush in his 2007 State of the Union address, a time when the relative energy independence of ethanol-producing Brazil was enviable. Now, the U.S. is the world's foremost biofuel producer, and more countries keep setting long-term biofuel targets. But new research from the World Resources Institute shows that might not be the wisest move. In a new report published today, WRI Senior Fellow Tim Searchinger wrote that, quote, bioenergy challenges a sustainable food future most directly when government policy causes diversion of food crops into ethanol or biodiesel for transportation. Since a growing world population will demand a 70% increase in yearly caloric production by 2050, the report said agricultural land is needed for agriculture, and what's not used should be conserved. As for energy efficiency, the report was also damning. Compared to the energy in biofuels, current photovoltaic solar panels are 100 times more efficient acre to acre. And throw in the fact that electric engines can be 2 or 3 times more efficient than combustion engines, and we're looking at as much as a 300-fold efficiency gap. So what should policymakers do? The WRI recommendations were clear. Phase out biofuel subsidies and make sure no more ethanol is added to gasoline blends. That means that E85 ethanol at the pump may never become E90, and just maybe we'd be better off for it. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Controls the past now, controls the future. Controls the present now, controls the past. Controls the past now, controls the future. Controls the present now. Now testify.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So look, that repatriation thing, we've seen that movie, haven't we? Did we see that movie? We don't need a rerun. We don't need a sequel. We saw that jobs were lost. I think it was 160,000 jobs overall were lost. And they took the money that they repatriated and they basically divvied it up amongst themselves. And what makes you think that they're not going to do that again? Just my thought on it. So, call Barbara Boxer's office. You're not going to move Rand Paul, but maybe Boxer you got a shot with. That'll be interesting. And also kind of cool that, our friend Dave Johnson, getting a shot thrown at him by the president. Don't read that Huffington Post section on trade, because, someone's actually paying attention to just how bad this TPP can be. A week from today, exactly a week from today, the Keystone Progress Summit, Progressive Summit's going to be happening February 6th and 7th, Hilton, there in Harrisburg. It's hosted by Keystone Progress and the Progress Summit. They're going to have people from all across the country come in, hold panels, featured speakers. Bernie Sanders, Cecile Robert, Richardson's going to be there from Planned Parenthood. They're going to have workshops, all kind of stuff, all kind of chances to network and rub elbows and do all of that. I think it's a good thing. And then after Friday night's keynote speech by the president of Planned Parenthood, we're in conjunction with the Raging Chicken, so the Raging Chicken Press and the Rick Smith Show, we're going to get together to have a meetup at Anthony's microbrew and pizza shop there in Harrisburg, just down the street from the Hilton. Probably be about 7:30, I guess it'll be, because it's when the speech is over. We're going to get together and talk and do all of that stuff, have some beer and some pizza, and get to know each other and figure out how we can move everyone forward. It's a thought, and maybe stand up against some of the really bad policy that I do see the Republicans in the House and Senate pushing forward. To me, it's just about getting active, getting engaged, and getting to know your neighbor. Pretty simple stuff. And I hope to see you at the Anthony's Micro Pub and Pizza Place there in Harrisburg after the Keystone Progress Summit next Friday. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. California port truck drivers employed by Pace Cartage have won a court judgment of over $2 million plus interest and attorney fees in a Port of Los Angeles, Long Beach wage theft case. The court ruled that they were employees, not independent contractors. Attorney Alvin M. Gomez.
The court awarded almost $2.1 million, plus there's going to be interest on that amount for the past 2 years, plus attorney fees and costs, which should exceed over $1.5 million on top of the $2.1 million.
Gomez says the independent contractor issue played a major role in this case. That's when companies misclassify workers as contractors when they are in reality employees.
Companies employ schemes in order to avoid the payment of employment tax, workers' comp, insurance, all those things that an employee should have, and they come with a scheme in order to profit from the hard work of those who actually do the work, and the companies profit by stealing the wages of these employees.
Gomez says that Pace is appealing the California Superior Court ruling. The Rebuild America Act, a 5-year plan to rebuild America's infrastructure, would spend $1 trillion in a bid to create roughly 13 million jobs. That's what U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders intends with his bill introduced this week. The AFL-CIO backs the bill, as does the American Society of Civil Engineers. Senator Barbara Mikulski co-sponsored the Rebuild America Act. The bill would make specific targeted investments over a 5-year period to rebuild roads, bridges, passenger and freight rail, transit, broadband, the electrical grid, and national parks. The AFL-CIO says this is a blueprint of what to do about our crumbling infrastructure and would create millions of jobs. U.S. Representative Mark Pocan is strongly against fast-track authority for the proposed Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. Pocan says this deal is a bad deal for workers in many ways, and Congress should not give up its constitutional responsibility and authority on the TPP.
If we're going to protect the environment, if we're going to protect American workers, if we're going to protect our food safety and our medications that come into this country, we're going to protect our sovereignty to have local laws like Buy American and Buy Local. We need to know what's in this trade deal, and giving up our responsibility as members of Congress to actually debate and to amend this is a bad deal.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. Bank of Labor offers a business Visa card with no annual fee and points earned with every purchase, as well as rental vehicle and travel accident insurance. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
And brought to you in part by unionjobs.com, listing open positions with unions, socially allied groups, and community organizations. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The man who sends the investor class diving through their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
At every trough you stop to feed. With your arrogance, your ignorance and greed. Now here come the cuts and redundancy. Through the absolute indifference, the avarice, incompetence, your arrogance, your ignorance, your greed.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So tomorrow, the big day tomorrow, a little bit of labor history. It's Ida May Day. So make sure you go to laborhistoryin2.com, check out Ida May Day, because tomorrow, back in 1940, Ida May Fuller became the very first recipient of a little thing called Social Security. A whopping $22.54 she was able to collect for the month. It may sound like a small little bit of money, but a huge, huge thing that has kept millions of people out of poverty, people like my grandmother. The great thing about Ida, she paid into about 3 years, and this is what you call a good investment. She paid about 3 years into it. She retired at 65, lived to 100 years old. Now imagine if she didn't have Social Security. Imagine those 35 years after 65. You think? I got some problems with this whole push towards privatization of our Social Security, which is why I've asked Nancy Altman. She has written an amazing book titled Social Security Works, why Social Security isn't going broke and how expanding it will help us all. Nancy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I look at this, and there's so much push from the folks on the right that Social Security's broke. We got to have chain CPI. We got to have COLA cuts and all of these things. And you'll see a UFO before you see a Social Security check. To me, it's just all scare and smear. I think Social Security with some tweaks could be fantastic into the future, and worth saving.
You're exactly right. Social Security is extremely conservatively financed, and its finances are carefully monitored. And one of the parts of its conservative financing is that it projects out 75 years. The program's only been around 80 years, but every single year it projects out 75 years. When you project out that far, sometimes you'll show a surplus, sometimes you'll show a deficit. You won't show exact balance. But the point is that we are the wealthiest nation in the world, and our benefits are modest by virtually any standard. There's no question we can afford this program. But instead, when there's a deficit project way out in the future, very manageable in size, the fearmongers go, oh my gosh, crisis, when there's no question this is not a matter, they say, oh, it's simple math. Well, the simple math is that we can afford this program. Right. And the question is, do we want it and do we want to expand it? And our view is expanding it is the right thing to do.
I'm with you as well, because look, what's been allowed to happen, and corporate America allowing to destroy defined benefit plans, we've been stuck with these crummy 401ks that honestly, no one in their rational right mind can look at that and say that's been a success. We're heading towards a retirement crisis. That three-legged stool we were told that you go into retirement with, two of those legs have been chopped off with stagnant wages and destroyed pensions. Now all we really got left is Social Security, and they want to whack that leg off.
Well, and you made a very important point in your introduction when you were talking about Ida May Fuller. You can outlive savings, and many people, unfortunately, do outlive their savings, but you cannot outlive Social Security. It's and your spouse can't either. It provides benefits for you and your spouse. So the three-legged stool is actually an image, and we talk about it in our book, that was someone in the private sector came up with it in the 1940s who worked for an insurance company and wanted to sell these products. It's really more accurate to think of it as a pyramid where the base, the very strong foundation, is Social Security. And on that, you can supplement it. But the question is, how big do we want the base to be? And right now, that base is not strong enough. Benefits are actually going down as a result of legislation that was enacted in 1983. As you mentioned, on top of it, we used to at least have defined benefit plans, which were not perfect, but were a good supplement. Those are disappearing. So we should not be eroding the base further. We should be expanding it. That's the way to confront a number of challenges facing the country, including the one you mentioned, the retirement income crisis.
But the reality is, we keep hearing this messaging, from the people who want to privatize it, put it into Wall Street, take that money and gamble it on Wall Street like they've done with our 401ks. And they keep with these frames of, you're going to see a UFO before you see a Social Security check, and it's going to go broke, it's going to go bust. It's adding to the deficit. Another one of my favorite lie myths, because it doesn't add to the deficit, does it?
Not a penny. It is completely self-financing, and it has no borrowing authority. In fact, it's a creditor of the government. It has reserves of $2.8 trillion and growing. That's a surplus of $2.8 trillion. And you're right, Wall Street would love to get its hands on that because Wall Street doesn't get a penny of that. And indeed, Social Security is extremely efficient. It spends less than a penny of the money it takes in administrative costs, less than a penny. You would not find any private sector plan, certainly 401ks, which have a lot of high fees and hidden fees. They tend to be 10%, 15%.
Yep.
A penny, less than a penny on a dollar is why the program works so well and why it's so popular.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Nancy, the one thing that I'm thankful for during the Bush years that didn't happen was in 2004 into 2005 when Bush was running around with his file cabinet saying, Social Security's broke. It's just a bunch of IOUs. Which you're backed by the full faith and credit of the federal government, but that's a whole nother story. And he really was trying to push to privatize a portion of it. I am so grateful that didn't happen because just a couple of short years later, bang, the economy goes collapse. Wall Street's on its knees, and seniors screwed.
That's exactly right. The American people were too smart to buy that line. And one thing about the so-called IOUs, that line was first used by Alf Landon in 1936. This is not a new attack. And at that time, responsible people were saying, no. These are IOUs, make it sound like some casual thing. These are legal documents with the same legal status as all the other treasury bonds that the United States issues. And as you say, backed by the full faith and credit, the rest of the world is investing in these so-called worthless IOUs, these treasury bonds. It's a real slander and an effort to undermine people's confidence. And that's what a lot of these attacks are, this idea that it won't be there. There's a reason the American people are worried about it because they hear this over and over, but it's literally one man it's a number of billionaires, and we talk about this in our book. There's been a decades-long, literally billionaire-funded campaign to undermine confidence in Social Security. And unfortunately, they haven't succeeded in undermining support for the program, but they have undermined confidence. And that's a tremendous disservice to the American people. So if I can just add one more point, the Social Security's cash benefits are vital, but there's an intangible benefit that Social Security is supposed to provide, and that, as its name implies, is security, a sense of peace of mind, that if your wages are lost as a result of old age or a permanent disabling accident, or you die with young children, Social Security is there to replace a part of your wages. You've got to know it'll be there. That's what gives you peace of mind. Yep. And that's the disservice that the American people have suffered.
It was always explained to me, Nancy, that it's social insurance. It's anti-poverty insurance, so that there's a line in the sand that no one falls below, which is why I believe it's such an important program. And if you want to read the truth to skinny, you want to get the actual fact. The book is Social Security Works, written by Nancy Altman, and you have a co-author, right?
Eric Kingson, yes, who is also my co-director in founding our organization, which is called Social Security Works, and a coalition that's been fighting to get the truth out, to beat back these proposals like the chain CPI, and to get the right answer, which is expansion of our benefits.
There you go. We've got links at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Nancy's name. It'll take you right there. I do want to ask a couple of questions, though, because, it does throw out that, I keep hearing that there's some shortfalls. That in 2037, 2038, I guess we're looking down the road a bit. There may be some funding problems where Social Security will pay maybe 75%. Is that accurate?
The point is that nobody has a crystal ball, of course, but every year since the program started paying benefits in wartime and peacetime and recession and good times, there are trustees who are in charge of this fund, and they every year issue a report to Congress, which you can find online,
right,
every single year, projecting way out into the future. And it is true that over the last few years, they have projected, and the years vary. The last year's report was 2033 for the combined old age and survivors and disability funds. 2033 was 75 cents on the dollar thereafter. So it's way in the future. The point is that this, again, should reassure the American people. We know 20 years ahead of time that we need to take action.
Right.
And the action we talk about is getting the rich to pay their fair share.
Scrap the cap.
That's one way. Get them to pay the same rate that everybody else pays on their income, and we have a number of other suggestions too. But we also expand benefits, and when we talk about expanding, we mean two things. One is increase current benefits for everyone starting right away. The other is to expand the kind of benefits. We are the only industrialized country that does not have, as the president mentioned in the State of the Union, that doesn't have paid parental leave. We don't have paid sick leave. And those are kinds of benefits that work perfectly under Social Security because, as I say, it's insurance against the loss of wages. And those are times when wages are lost.
Right.
So again, we have the question of solvency and can we pay the benefits is an important question, but it's a means to an end. The end is what level of security do we want for the nation's workers and family? Do we all together want for each other and ourselves?
Right.
Then how do we fairly pay for it? Again, we are the wealthiest nation in the world. There is no question we can pay for a much more robust Social Security. This is a political question in the best sense of politics, and that is how do we as a people decide how we want to take our collective resources, how much to keep to ourselves, how much to use for all of us in a program like Social Security.
But Nancy, I'm told we're broke. Didn't you hear? We know austerity. We're broke.
Well, a lot of us feel broke because there's been an upward redistribution of wealth. So Bill Gates is not broke, and Warren Buffett isn't broke, but the
Koch brothers are spending $889 million in the next presidential election.
In 1 year,
they're not broke.
They certainly are not broke. The problem is that everybody else has had their wages stagnate as the very wealthy have gotten uber rich, and all of those gains on average have gone to those at the top. In the 1950s and 60s, it was a much more even distribution, and if we and one solution of expanding Social Security, I mentioned retirement income crisis. Today's seniors, about half of them are very close to poverty, if not in poverty. In addition, there's a squeeze on middle-class families, but another challenge that expanding Social Security helps is this upward redistribution of wealth. When we had the roaring 20s and terrible inequality of wealth, we enacted programs like the minimum wage and Social Security, and that made our country much stronger. We're going through that kind of period again. We should raise the minimum wage, and we should raise our deferred wages, which is Social Security.
Yeah, because when the other part of this is if you start raising wages, you start raising contributions into Social Security as well, and saving some of those other problems. Because I've often wondered if by focusing on we're solve it until 2037, if that wasn't just a canard to make us to go, oh, there's a crisis, we got to do something, and we got to do something drastic now. And I remember the Cat Food Commission with Alan Simpson and Erskine Bowles and the rest of them saying, oh, we got to have severe, deep cuts. All the while, Alan Simpson saying, yeah, during the Reagan years, we spent a couple $1 trillion on Star Wars and this and that and 2 wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the money's gone, he said.
I don't know whether to laugh or cry sometimes when I listen to this, because if you ask any normal person, okay, here's your situation. You can pay every single penny. I guarantee you can pay every single penny of your obligations for the next 20 years. And 20 years from now, I can guarantee you at this moment, you have enough to pay 75 cents on the dollar. The next 20 years, you're going to have to figure out how to pay that 25 cents on the dollar. Most people would go, really? Fantastic.
Absolutely.
I love it. And that's why this whole conversation has gotten so turned on its head and crazy. The Congress enacted a law for other private sector plans, calling them in the green zone if they were healthy, the yellow zone, obviously, if you had to look, a little bit of warning, in red zone if there was really a problem.
Right.
By those standards that Congress enacted, working with actuaries and private pension people, Social Security is in the green zone.
And that's a good thing. And I'm so glad that someone is out there touting, 1, we need to expand. 2, we need to make sure that wealthy people are paying their share. And the other part is pushing back on that frame that I may see a UFO before a Social Security check.
that's an outrage. And if any of your listeners want to join our cause, if they go to Social Security Works/expand, we have a petition. We're trying to get this word out that the and polling shows the American people are with us. So we want to be able to show Congress that as well.
We'll make sure we get a link at thericksmithshow.com. And of course, the book, and I highly suggest people run out, go get it from Powell's, get it wherever you have to. Social Security works. It does. This is why the title, Why Social Security Isn't Going Broke, and how expanding it will help us all, which I'm in favor of. Nancy, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks for writing the book. And it's good to hear someone out there defending the system that has helped my grandmother so greatly.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an important service that the truth get out.
Thanks so much, Nancy Altman. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. What follows is for those who want to change the world from what it is to what they believe it should be. Those words were penned in the opening paragraph of the book Rules for Radicals, whose author, Saul Alinsky, was born on this day in labor history. The year was 1909. Saul Alinsky became one of the most famous community organizers in Chicago and even U.S. history. Alinsky was born to Russian Jewish immigrants. He earned his degree in archaeology from the University of Chicago, but could not find work due to the Great Depression. His first turn at organizing was that of a part-time labor organizer for the Congress of Industrial Organizations. Soon, he left labor organizing for a more broad-based community organizing. He worked in the back of the yards, forming the Back of the Yards Council, which became a prototype for scores of community organizations. In 1940, Alinsky formed the Industrial Areas Foundation, which served as a leader in community organizing training. He traveled the country helping to form similar community organizations. He then worked with African American organizations, most notably helping to found Chicago's Woodland Organization. The Woodland Organization took on issues such as segregated housing and community health. The Woodland Organization remains active to this day. Alinsky's Rules for Radicals became a guidebook for organizing strategies for countless campaigns. A Time magazine article claimed that American democracy is being altered by Alinsky's ideas, and National Review magazine founder William F. Buckley said Alinsky was, quote, very close to being an organizational genius. At the core of his book are 12 straightforward maxims. For example, a good tactic is one your people enjoy. Another is keep the pressure on, never let up. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We're talking about the 1860 Republican Convention. Senator William Seward was sure to win. But Abraham Lincoln and his operatives had at the last minute become the only obstacle to Seward's victory. Using railroad company contacts, Lincoln got discount fares for his supporters to travel to the convention. Lincoln's team also printed counterfeit tickets to the convention and gave them to Lincoln supporters with instructions to show up early. By the time Lincoln's name was put into nomination, the hall was full of his supporters and the roar was explosive. On the first ballot, Seward's best chance to win, he only received 173 votes. Lincoln had 102, and no one else was close. By the fourth ballot, Lincoln was only 2 votes short, and the Ohio delegation chairman announced the switch of 4 Ohio votes to the man from Illinois. Biography, deal-making, and casting Lincoln as a second choice had taken him to victory. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
I'm breaking the rocks in the hot sun. I fought the law and the law won. I fought the law and the law won.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Some interesting news. Yesterday, Rob McCord resigns from being the treasurer here in Pennsylvania. Quite abruptly, everyone was shocked. Oh, my goodness, he resigned. And then immediately there was some allegations, maybe of some federal investigations. Now the story I'm reading, he's planning on pleading guilty to federal charges of strong-arming some campaign donors using the state. I mean, really, I like Rob McCord, had him on the program a number of times, but I can't believe a guy that smart would get himself caught up in trying to strong arm people by saying, this is the allegation. I don't know if it's true. This is what the initial reports are, that for campaign contributions, he was saying, hey, if you don't pony up, you might have a hard time getting some Commonwealth accounts, which I hope he didn't do. But it looks like at this point, trouble. So I guess, get his way back into the private sector. I don't know. I wonder if he's going to get any jail time. And if he does, I'm sure it'll be a nice, cushy kind of place because, somebody in that position, with the kind of money he's got, not going to general population. But, this to me highlights the fact that we need to get money out of politics. Because you've taken a guy who I think is a decent guy. I like him. I've said that publicly. Honestly, in the gubernatorial race, I wanted Tom Wolf, and I had always been the guy I wanted. But I don't think McCord would have been a bad guy. But I think it put him in this position that I've got to go out and I've got to raise money. I've got to compete by raising more and more and more and more. Because he was running against Wolf, who had a whole bunch of money of his own. I just think that the money in the system is perverting it. It's harming the system, and it's making good people do things like this and desperate. And that's the thing that gets me. I mean, at the end of this, I don't want people begging for oh, please, I need handouts. It's just one of those things that's really kind of frustrating. Let's go to the phone line, see who's on line one. Welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
This message is for Clayton Eventon.
Thanks for that one. But at the end of it, you kind of go, you look at this, and to me, it's the money. You take the money out of the system, and you end up with potentially a much more inclusive structure. But it's sad to me. I got to be honest. I'm sad to see this out of Rob McCord. It'll be interesting to see in the next week what happens with the guilty plea, if it is actually coming. From the reports that I've been reading, looks like it's going to happen. And the statement that I saw said Mr. McCord will be pleading guilty to certain federal charges to be filed arising out of his attempts in the spring of 2014 to raise campaign contributions from two potential contributors by communicating if they failed to make campaign contributions, he could make it difficult for them to do business with the Commonwealth. So, it's sad. And I got to tell you, it's a sad day for that. Because, again, like I said, I think he's a decent guy. But we do live in the post-Citizens United world where you need the TV money. I mean, think about all the money. And the interesting thing about the Wolf campaign is they didn't buy any radio. Everything was television. Everything was television and internet. And as anyone know who's ever put a TV ad on, it's really expensive. I've always said we should have publicly financed elections won. And as part of having one of the license to use the public airwaves, be it radio, be it television, that a certain amount of time should be given to each candidate, see how they use it. To me, one of these campaigns is a good opportunity to see what kind of a manager they are, what kind of a campaign they run, what kind of a leader they are, other than who can go raise the most money from wherever, be it by strong arm tactics or have the Koch brothers write you a huge check. I got to tell you, I'm frustrated and angered by the fact that our elections keep doubling in the costs, because that means people like you and me, we're never going to be able to run for public office. It's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to compete with these deep pockets. I think it's fundamentally bad for democracy, because when you don't have these kind of you don't have competitive races, when you don't have that kind of inclusive atmosphere, I think you lose people, which is why we've got a lot of people who don't vote, which is why in the midterm elections, you get 13% of in the primary, it was 13% of the people who voted in the midterm primary in my area. That's insane. So I look at this and I tell you, I'm saddened. It's quite saddening. Anyway, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk with Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Stick around. Right back after this.
They laid their future plans. They saw that food was everything to man. And maybe then they had a thought to help the poorest folks, but it only brought more money to their hands. And the boys who getting poor, people turn away, not equal to admit the way they planned. It's taking all the soul away from everything they grew. They can't have a lick on which to stand.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
Another day, another pipeline goes kablooey.
U.S. pipelines now rupturing faster than we can keep track of them.
The two brokered a new nuclear deal allowing U.S. companies to provide India with reactors for commercial purposes.
Obama's trip to India, a boost to nuclear energy.
We have a window of opportunity.
International Monetary Fund calls for an end to fossil fuel subsidies. Plus, some good news. Fracking banned in Scotland, and a red fox returns to Yosemite.
All of those returns and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Yosemite National Park says a rare Sierra Nevada red fox has been sighted in the park for the first time in nearly 100 years.
Oh, this is a big one. You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
For listeners old enough to get that joke, you're welcome. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air, and even as pipelines are still rupturing all over the country, the U.S. Senate, it seems, has now finally passed a bill to force the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yep, it goes back to the House now, but they still don't have enough votes yet in the Senate to override a promised presidential veto. So it's just more theater.
And for the record, the 9 Democrats who are joining all of the Republicans in the U.S. Senate to support Keystone XL pipeline, that would be Senators Michael Bennet of Colorado, Tom Carper of Delaware, Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, Joe Donnelly of Indiana, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Claire McCaskill of Missouri, John Tester of Montana, and Mark Warner of Virginia. All of those Democrats calling for the dirtiest oil in the world to be shipped from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico to be shipped overseas for maybe 50 permanent jobs for a Canadian company.
Yeah.
Thanks, Democrats.
And a correction. Earlier this week, we mistakenly reported that there were 4 pipeline ruptures in the month of January alone in the U.S., but actually, we were wrong.
Who does your fact-checking, Desi Doyen?
In fact, there have been 5 pipeline ruptures in the month of January.
Oh, man, so it's worse than even you thought.
Yep, and there's a reason for these pipeline problems. An investigation on pipeline safety and oversight from the National Transportation and Safety Board released this week found, quote, systemic flaws. Not only are gas companies failing to conduct inspections and tests on their aging pipelines in populated areas, but the states have inconsistent regulations and not enough trained inspectors.
And by not enough, you mean sometimes none at all.
Right. Sometimes those states don't inspect any of them. President Obama's recent trip to India concluded with no climate agreement, unlike his recent historic emissions deal with China. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is not ready to commit to emissions cuts, but the two leaders did reach a modest agreement to cooperate on clean energy development and financing. The biggest winners, however, were the U.S. nuclear industry, because Modi agreed to repeal India's liability laws that require nuclear energy companies to pay all the costs of a nuclear accident, and instead will probably foist it off onto India's taxpayers.
So American companies are free to build nuke plants in India now without having to pay up if things go wrong?
That's right.
Nice. Thanks, Obama.
Calls are growing around the world for governments to use the current slump in oil prices to phase out fossil fuel subsidies.
We have a window of opportunity. The price of oil has gone down significantly and probably for a period of time. Now is the time to actually remove the world over the subsidies to use of energy.
Well, who was that hippie leftist calling for the end of fossil fuel subsidies?
That was the director of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, the world spends about $550 billion a year on fossil fuel subsidies. U.S. taxpayers shell out $5 billion to the oil industry in permanent tax breaks.
So the call is stop helping out these oil companies. They're doing fine. They don't need our help anymore. Put that money elsewhere where it can actually do some good.
That's right. Finally, some good news. Fracking has just been banned in Scotland. The temporary moratorium will allow the Scottish government to conduct scientific studies on environmental impacts. Pennsylvania's new Democratic governor, Tom Wolf, has also banned fracking in state parks and forests. And finally, the rare and elusive Sierra Nevada red fox has been spotted in Yosemite National Park for the first time in nearly 100 years. It's one of the rarest animals in North America. Likely fewer than 50 remain.
Wow, just 50. Nonetheless, some good news there. Thank you very much, Desi Doyen. For more good news and occasionally some bad news, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com, where we are now celebrating our 11th anniversary of independent troublemaking and muckraking. But we need your help to continue. Please stop on by and consider a donation to help us do exactly that. Find us and follow us on the Twitters and the Facebooks at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
So, a big story coming out of Wisconsin. Evidently, Wisconsin's 4th District Court of Appeals, in a 3-0 ruling. In the 3-0 ruling, they figured out that that people singing in the Capitol was okay. Evidently, if you remember back in 2013, in July, August, September, the state Capitol Police there had issued about 400 citations to people who were singing, because you can't have singing in the Capitol. Well, now what you found out is, the fourth District Court of Appeals said, you know what, singing, come on, really? They ruled it a violation of the First Amendment, because evidently singing is now. There's freedom of the press and freedom of speech and, of course, freedom of singing, which I'm all in favor of. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the rest of the world. Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here. I'm just thankful that the U.S. Capitol doesn't have that sort of restriction on singing, just because, we had one intern who for a while would go up to our little booth up there, and after he left, we found all these videos on the computer that he took with the webcam of him sort of singing his butt off in the little soundproof booth that we have. And we were seriously considering putting him on YouTube for a little while.
You should have.
My old boss Lisa put a kibosh on that, but it was some pretty funny stuff.
That is funny. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, really, are you that tyrannical that you're going to stop people from singing. Now, granted, they were singing songs of solidarity and songs of, of sticking together and fighting for, better wages, better hours, conditions, people coming together. And, that's, subversive in places like Wisconsin's capital, thanks to their governor. But, at the end of it, I can't believe you would issue a citation to someone for singing.
No, exactly. That's pretty troubling stuff. And even in DC, we've sort of had issues like that for a while. There were a group of people who would hold sort of flash mobs at the Lincoln Memorial or the Jefferson Memorial, or those who would go to the National Gallery of Art when there was a piece that Eric Cantor and a number of other Republicans objected to that showed a Jesus-like figure covered in ants to signify the pain that AIDS patients felt. So they ended up going there to dance in protest of that, and I think ended up getting charged with some pretty heavy stuff. So it's one of those odd issues that takes place anywhere, I guess.
Yeah, but the thing that gets me is you use this heavy-handed tactics, and it takes years for it to get undone. I mean, my frustration is they're able to put the fist down, and it takes you years. And what if you can't afford the lawyer and the process and all that? It's just wrong, which is why we should be voting them bums out. Anyway, let's find out what's going on. I guess we're not going to have Mittens to kick around in 2016, huh?
We are not, and in traditional Mitt Romney fashion, nobody really knew where he stood in the hours leading up to the teleconference. There was initially a slew of headlines, including on our own site, indicating that he was going to announce his run today at 11 o'clock in a conference call with supporters and another one with donors and whatnot. And that ended up sort of shocking a lot of people over here by essentially being him announcing that he is in fact not going to be running for election again. Saying that he is hoping that there is going to be another person within the party who could take the mantle of leadership from him. Not that he was really ever considered to be that big of a leader of the party at large. But now it looks like a two-person race when it comes down to who's going to be the establishment candidate. And that's between both Jeb Bush and Christie. Christie, who is in fact going to be meeting with Mitt Romney, I believe, next week for dinner. So there could still be some drama yet when it comes to Mitten.
So maybe there's I'll scratch my back, you scratch yours, and maybe he becomes VP.
I mean, I guess that's a possibility. Considering that there's really a lot of talent on the ticket who, don't have the sort of boredom factor of Mitt Romney, that'd be a pretty odd choice to go with.
Yeah.
There's Susana Martinez. There's
that's mine.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's Kelly Ayotte. There's a lot of people that don't look like the traditional sort of boring white Republican. Marco Rubio or whatnot is another example. And by going for Mitt Romney for any of the leading candidates, that would just be kind of a weird little move on their part.
Yeah, but I look at Martinez. She just got herself into a little situation out there in New Mexico as they're working to pass right to work. Turns out that there were some emails going back and forth with her in the loop, looking for a sugar daddy to fund a right to work study that actually showed that it's a good thing.
I mean, that's interesting, but I really don't see that as being something that's going to take her down. We have Scott Walker being entertained as a viable candidate, and if
he's not a viable candidate,
well, he's being billed as one.
All right, that's a good way to put a little more money into his pocket as on his way out the door. But hey, good stuff. I can't wait. I'm sad to see Mittens out. I think he would have been a nice addition to the fray, but we'll see. That may just leave another spot on the stage with the cavalcade of crazy. So let's move along. The White House is open to a trade deal passed with all Republican support. Really?
Yeah, this is something that was talked about today by Press Secretary Josh Earnest. He said that the White House is fine if it's a majority Republican bill. Essentially saying that even if it's with all Republicans, they'd still be fine with it. And essentially they're looking for pretty much just a simple majority. This is something that's really caused sort of a schism between Democrats and the White House. We recently had Obama yesterday talking to House Democrats in Philadelphia and essentially saying that they should need to be informed on the issue. They should stop reading Huffington Post, things like that. And this is something that's certainly going to be a big issue down the road, considering there are a lot of Democrats who are pretty vocally against these trade deals that he's putting forward, not the least of which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Yeah, I take that comment about Huffington Post. I take that as a shot against my friend Dave Johnson, who works over at the Campaign for America's Future. He's been doing a ton of writing over at Huffington Post on how bad these trade deals are, and he's been following it for a long time. So I took that as kind of a direct shot to Dave, and good for him.
No, I mean, yeah, this is something that Obama is, I guess, pretty much dedicated to. It doesn't seem at this point like he's really consulted with many, House Democrats on how they're going to get this done. But it's certainly one of the more troubling aspects of his presidency in this late point in time.
And what's frustrating to me is I sat 20 feet from the guy when he was a candidate, where he said, "You can trust me. I'm not going to pass these bad trade deals." In fact, he talked about renegotiating NAFTA, and there was all of this. We're going to have a different kind of trade regime. Yet this is not just doubling down. This is doubling down on bad trade deals.
No, and of course, just mentioning back of him as a candidate, we saw the Obama campaign really kind of focus on NAFTA as one of the reasons why Hillary Clinton couldn't be trusted to be president. Despite the fact that she spoke back against it pretty forcefully.
Yep.
But it was just sort of a tool in the arsenal then, and now the shoe is certainly on the other foot.
Yeah, when I had her on the program during that time frame, because during that point, Pennsylvania was still in the mix of actually having being a choosing state, well into March, when generally it's over. So it was interesting that we were able to get a whole bunch of really good, high-powered folks on the program like Hillary to talk about trade. And I asked her flat out, I'm going, what are we going to do with China? What are we going to do with these bad trade deals? And she's like, you can't blame China for eating our lunch. We're the one giving it to them. And the same thing with these bad trade deals. She was spot on then.
That's a very interesting point. And again, that's something that's probably going to come up in the next campaign. We're going to have to see how Democrats deal with this, but this is certainly something that's going to probably drive at least a minor schism within the party, considering there is sort of an emerging progressive movement, one that's been very vocally against us.
Yeah. Did you see? Speaking of Hillary, did you see at the Iowa Freedom Summit, Sarah Palin's rambling, incoherent speech? Evidently, someone sent me an email saying that by her holding up this pro-Hillary bumper sticker magnet or whatever the hell it was, she actually inadvertently raised $25,000 for the pro-Hillary PAC, which would have made her one of the kind of like one of the club for Hillary people.
Ready for Hillary, yeah. God, that's remarkable.
And I guess it just shows. I would love to know who it was who donated. Was it Democratic donors who saw her hold this and decided I'm gonna do it because of her, or was it Republican people who follow Sarah Palin going, yeah, we're gonna go after Hillary by giving her money?
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably just a nice little visual that was probably sent around. Probably a screen cap or something like that. Just sort of just another reason to advertise, and something that really certainly grabs attention at least.
Yeah, but I like my idea better.
Yeah, I like your idea better. It's more colorful. Let's go with that.
There you go. All right, let's move along. Monday, budget day, huh?
Yep, and trust me, we're very excited about it over here and not dreading it at all. So the White House is unveiling their budget. This is $74 billion above the caps that were placed in sequestration as a way to essentially move beyond that. This is aimed at being split evenly among defense and domestic programs, both of which have been, sort of suffering under the odd 2013 sequestration plan that was put into effect a little while back. And this, of course, is going to not be accepted by the Republicans in Congress. We're going to have to see some kind of, fight going on between, them and this. But there's certainly sort of a mood that there could perhaps be a budget passed this year, and not just sort of the continuing resolutions that we've seen in the past, since at this point there is quite a bit of bipartisan talk about how ridiculous it's been that we haven't had a legitimate budget for long.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuts to me, and it's about time we start talking about ending sequester and start actually funding things that need to be done. Maybe some any chance of this actually passing? I guess that's the other question, and I guess it's kind of a dumb one because it hasn't thus far. Any chance of this moving forward?
The way it stands now at the White House, no. It's absolutely not going to. But there is likely going to be, revisions and likely movements made between both the White House and congressional leaders to try to get some kind of common ground on this. Just at this point, just kind of save face, since it's been such a, major talking point for both parties. Those who have been introducing kind of, lip service bills such as no budget, no pay acts and whatnot. So I think there probably is going to be something done. Whether or not it's going to look like this, that remains to be seen, and probably will not. Whether or not it's actually going to be useful, that also remains to be seen, but will probably be a little bit dangerous, since, there's probably going to be some heavy pushes to try to appeal to Republicans that could look pretty unsavory to a lot of Democrats.
Yay. Okay, now lastly, the big question, the most important thing, Deflategate. Did they deflate the balls or not?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Who's going to win? Or do we care?
I'm a Niners guy, so, I'm pretty much anybody but Seahawks. So I'm, I guess, going for the Patriots, which feels a little bit weird to say. I don't think I've ever said that before.
Wow.
So, there we go.
All right, I'm rooting for I'm rooting for a blackout.
There we go. That could be kind of fun.
There we go.
Yeah.
Since I've already seen the commercials, which just seems dumb to me, but here we go. All righty, well, enjoy the weekend and watch the big game, since I'm not allowed to say the SB words, since it's trademarked.
Are you serious? Really?
Yeah, they trademarked the SB word, so you can literally be sued for saying the super word.
Well, what if we say superb owl?
Okay, well, there is that. Or if you do it as soup, like SOUPER.
Yeah, would you like soup or a bowl? Bowl.
I would like both, thank you. A bread
There
bowl.
we go.
There you
I'm
go.
sorry if I just got you sued. I apologize.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Justin, always great talking with you, man.
Thank you.
Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. It's time for a trip back in time, but not too far.
We must continue investing in new methods of producing ethanol, using everything from wood chips to grasses to agricultural wastes.
That was President George W. Bush in his 2007 State of the Union address, a time when the relative energy independence of ethanol-producing Brazil was enviable. Now, the U.S. is the world's foremost biofuel producer, and more countries keep setting long-term biofuel targets. But new research from the World Resources Institute shows that might not be the wisest move. In a new report published today, WRI Senior Fellow Tim Searchinger wrote that, quote, bioenergy challenges a sustainable food future most directly when government policy causes diversion of food crops into ethanol or biodiesel for transportation. Since a growing world population will demand a 70% increase in yearly caloric production by 2050, the report said agricultural land is needed for agriculture, and what's not used should be conserved. As for energy efficiency, the report was also damning. Compared to the energy in biofuels, current photovoltaic solar panels are 100 times more efficient acre to acre. And throw in the fact that electric engines can be 2 or 3 times more efficient than combustion engines, and we're looking at as much as a 300-fold efficiency gap. So what should policymakers do? The WRI recommendations were clear. Phase out biofuel subsidies and make sure no more ethanol is added to gasoline blends. That means that E85 ethanol at the pump may never become E90, and just maybe we'd be better off for it. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Unless they change something this week, they'll be walking into the stadiums at 1 o'clock Sunday.
They will, and even if it does get resolved this week, we will see the replacement officials this weekend, because that turnaround can't happen so quickly.
Whistle baby, I'm a scout, repping for my team on Facebook. My last real job was as a line cook. for a Division III high school, and now I'm enforcing all these dope rules. Like calling the student for double dribble. My kid's hero was Roger Goodell. So what? I missed a little cheap hit. Let's check a replay for the ball. It's so baby.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Do you remember that? You remember the when the referees were out and they brought in the replacement refs? They had the scab refs out there making calls, and you go, really? I could do that, because I've never said that I could be an NFL official. There's no way. These guys, they get it right more often than not. But when they brought in the replacements, wow. And again, to me, it's one of those situations where you got the highlight between well-trained union members and not. Pretty simple stuff. But the big game this weekend, and one of the things that's going to be interesting to find out, and again, you got to have something to root for if your team isn't in it, or if the team that you root for isn't in it. And I don't really like either the Patriots or the Seahawks, to be honest. So you kind of root for something, blackout, the guy who's selling beer to break $1,000 for the day, something fun, if you will. Or maybe you start betting some of those lines, how many times will, they blow the whistle, or how many times, whatever. Here's an interesting one. Evidently, the Arizona Department of Health Services, their director wrote on his blog just recently that over 1,000 people in Arizona have come in contact with members of an unvaccinated Pinal County family that contracted the disease while at Disneyland. Their concern is that some of these people who came in contact with this unvaccinated family are going to go to the Super Bowl, where you're going to have 80,000 people crammed really close to each other, rubbing up against each other in the heat. You would think about it, and they're concerned that this could be a critical point in the outbreak, that this may be the place where it spreads. He continued by saying, if the public health system and medical community are able to identify every single susceptible case and get them into isolation, we have a chance of stopping this outbreak here. However, he writes, if we miss any potential cases and some of them go to a congregate setting with a number of susceptible contacts, we could be in for a long and protracted outbreak. So the Super Bowl, you could be betting on how many people get the measles coming out of the Super Bowl, which is not funny at all. What it is it's sad that we've got to talk about this. I mean, I would much rather talk about Deflategate, which is ridiculous and nonsensical, and on so many levels. But the fact that there are people in this country that would put everybody else at risk because of some twisted, bizarre myth is amazing to me. Now, I said from the beginning, look, back when Robert Kennedy Jr. was running around saying, the mercury in the preservatives, thimerosal, could potentially cause autism, I said, well, let's look into this, because I was having my kids vaccinated at the time. And I went to my doctor and I said, tell me about this. What do you know? Because look, I trust my doctor. I have a very good relationship with him, and I trust him. And I think I would hope everyone has that kind of a relationship. And he basically laid it out for me and said, these are the risks. This is what it is. There's not a lot of, there's no proof to what these allegations are. And he says, I don't think that's going to be the case. But with anything's going to have something of a risk. You poke somebody with a needle with nothing in it, and somebody's going to have a reaction. And I agree. But to then turn your head and say, I'm not doing it, scares me. Now, look, if I remember correctly, and I do, as a kid, I think my generation was the last one where parents said, little Johnny's got mumps or measles or chicken pox. Yeah, okay. Well, here, we'll bring our kids over to play with them. So they get them. Because the thought of the time, as I understand it, and I don't like it, I didn't like it then, I don't like it now, is that if you get it, then you'll build up an immunity to it. And if you live, you might not get it again. And you kind of had this, everybody getting it, and you had some that didn't make it and passed along. And then we said, hey, let's not go through all of that suffering and let's vaccinate, which seems logical to me. Seems kind of rational. But then you get these crazy religious zealots. Most of the people who are against this are the religious zealot type. The I believe folks, to no matter how much you put in front of them, it's I believe. Yeah, those folks. But it'll be interesting to see what happens because now you're going to have 80, 90,000 people. I'm not sure how big the Arizona Cardinals stadium is. But you're going to have all these people rubbing up against it. I'm sure it's going to be warm. They won't be bundled up like they were in Green Bay. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I can't wait for the report. That's it. So I hope everyone enjoys the big game. No, I'll be rooting for a blackout. And finally, a week from today, don't miss the Pennsylvania Progressive Summit. It's going to be Friday and Saturday next week, the 6th and 7th of February at the Hilton Hotel there in Harrisburg, right there on 2nd Street. It will be hosted by the Keystone Progress. The Progressive Summit is the largest gathering of progressive activists and organizers in the state. This year, they're going to have keynote speeches by Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont and also Cecile Richards, the president of Planned Parenthood. There will be more than 55 workshops and panels, networking opportunities, speakers, all kind of stuff, elbow rubbing, and hopefully nobody has measles, so you won't get sick there. So don't miss it. Go to paprogressivesummit.net to sign up and register. And also, we're going to be having a meetup directly after on Friday night at the Anthony's Micropub and Pizza. Thanks for being here. We'll see you Monday.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.